The CEO's hands trembled as she stood in the marble lobby, surrounded by cameras and shocked executives. Her parents screamed at the man beside her, a poor driver who had once begged her for $3. The crowd waited for her to deny everything, to choose wealth over disgrace. Instead, she grabbed his worn collar and kissed him in front of everyone. The scandal would cost her everything: her fortune, her company, her family's name. But if you stay until the end, you'll discover why she smiled while the world burned around her. Comment below what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're still here at the end, hit that like button. The morning Daniel Carter walked into Riverside Coffee House on East 47th Street, he had exactly $8.32 to his name. 6 of those dollars were needed for the subway fare to his interview. The remaining $2.32 would have to cover coffee, breakfast, and whatever dignity he could still afford. He stood in line behind lawyers in $1,000 suits and young professionals tapping on phones worth more than his monthly rent. His own suit, a charcoal gray ensemble he'd bought 12 years ago for a job he no longer had, hung slightly loose on his frame. He'd lost weight. Stress and single fatherhood had a way of doing that. The line moved forward. Daniel rehearsed his interview answers silently, his lips barely moving. I bring 12 years of driving experience, perfect safety record, and he stopped. What else did he bring? Desperation? A teenage daughter who needed new school supplies? Medical bills he couldn't pay? Next, Daniel stepped forward. The barista, a young woman with purple hair and multiple piercings, barely looked up. Medium coffee, Daniel said quietly. $3.50. His stomach dropped. $3.50. He'd miscalculated. He'd assumed, based on the faded menu board he'd seen through the window last week, the coffee was still $2.50. But prices change. Everything changes. Actually, Daniel's throat tightened. How much is a small? $2.75, Bob. Still not enough. He could feel the line growing impatient behind him. Someone coughed. Someone else shifted their briefcase. Just water, please. The barista finally looked at him, really looked at him, and something flickered across her face. Pity, maybe, or recognition, the kind that comes from seeing your own struggles reflected in someone else's eyes. Water's free, she said softly. But if you want, I can give you yesterday's coffee. We're supposed to throw it out anyway. No charge. The kindness was somehow worse than judgment would have been. Daniel felt heat crawl up his neck. No, thank you. Water's fine. He took his cup and moved toward the condiment station, trying to become invisible. The interview was in 40 minutes. Harrington Logistics, a mid-sized shipping company looking for executive drivers. The pay was decent. Decent enough to finally catch up on Emma's medical bills, maybe even afford the testing her doctor kept recommending. Emma, his daughter, 15 years old and already more mature than she should have to be. Last night, she told him not to worry about the science club trip she couldn't afford. It's just tide pools, Dad. I can watch videos online. She'd smiled when she said it, but Daniel had seen the disappointment in her eyes. He found a seat near the window and pulled out the printed directions to Harrington Logistics. The paper was already worn from being folded and unfolded dozens of times. He spread it on the table and studied the route, though he'd memorized it days ago. Excuse me. Daniel looked up. A woman stood beside his table, holding a coffee cup in each hand. She was probably in her mid-30s, dressed in faded jeans and a simple gray shirt. No jewelry, no makeup that he could see. Her dark hair was pulled back in a careless ponytail. She had the kind of face that was hard to read, not unfriendly, but carefully neutral. Is anyone sitting here? She asked. Daniel glanced around. The coffee shop was packed, every table occupied. No, go ahead. She sat down across from him and set both coffee cups on the table. For a moment, she just looked out the window at the morning traffic, seemingly lost in thought. Daniel returned to his directions, trying not to feel self-conscious about his cup of water. Big interview? He looked up again. The woman was watching him now, her expression mildly curious. That obvious? Daniel managed a small smile. The suit, the nervous energy, the way you keep checking your watch even though you checked it 30 seconds ago. She took a sip of her coffee. Also, you're wearing your visitor badge from the building across the street. Pre-interview building tour? Daniel glanced down. She was right. He'd forgotten to remove the temporary badge from yesterday's preliminary meeting. He peeled it off, embarrassed. Yeah, Harrington Logistics. Driver position. Good company, the woman said. Competitive pay, decent benefits. They have a reputation for treating employees fairly. You work there? I'm familiar with them. She pushed one of the coffee cups across the table toward Daniel. You look like you could use this more than I could use both. Daniel stared at the cup. I can't. It's already paid for, and I bought two by mistake. She said it casually, as if this sort of thing happened all the time. You'd actually be doing me a favor. It was obviously a lie, but it was a kind one. Daniel hesitated, pride warring with necessity. The coffee smelled incredible. Thank you, he said finally, accepting the cup. The warmth of it in his hands felt like more than just heat. It felt like possibility. They sat in silence for a moment. Daniel took a sip. Perfect. Not yesterday's burned dregs, but fresh, rich coffee that probably cost $5 or $6. I'm Daniel, he offered. Isabella. She didn't extend her hand, just nodded. So, 12 years of driving experience. That's what you were rehearsing earlier. You heard that? You were muttering in line. Don't worry, no one else noticed. Isabella leaned back in her chair. What kind of driving? Private car service, mostly. Executive transport. Daniel paused. Until the company downsized. That was 3 years ago. And since then? Whatever I could find. Uber, Lyft, delivery driving. Nothing steady. He didn't know why he was telling her this. Maybe it was the coffee or the way she listened without the polite but distant expression most people wore when the conversation turned uncomfortable. I have a daughter, 15. I'm trying to give her a stable life. That's admirable. It's necessary. Daniel surprised himself with the sharpness in his voice. He softened it. Sorry, it's been a hard few years. Don't apologize. Isabella's gaze was steady. Single parent? Her mother left when Emma was 3. Cancer scare. She recovered, but the fear changed her. She needed a fresh start. Without us. The words still hurt, even after all these years. She sends birthday cards sometimes. From Oregon, last I checked. That must have been difficult. What was difficult was explaining to a 3-year-old why Mommy wasn't coming home. Daniel stopped, shaking his head. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear all this. You're just trying to enjoy your coffee. I asked, Isabella said simply, and I'm listening. There was something about her, a quality Daniel couldn't quite name. She had the stillness of someone who'd learned to be comfortable in silence, and the focus of someone who actually heard what was being said instead of just waiting to speak. Emma's a good kid, Daniel continued, finding himself wanting to talk. Smart, really smart. She wants to study environmental science in college, marine biology specifically. She's obsessed with ocean ecosystems. He smiled, thinking of the posters covering Emma's bedroom walls. Last month, she spent 3 hours explaining ocean acidification to me. I understood maybe 10%, but I loved every minute of it. She sounds remarkable. She is. Daniel's smile faded. She's also showing some concerning symptoms. Dizzy spells, fatigue, chest pain. The doctor wants to run tests, but insurance only covers part of it. The rest, he gestured vaguely. That's why I need this job. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. How much are the tests? About $3,000, out of pocket. Might be nothing. Might be something serious. Daniel checked his watch. 25 minutes until the interview. Either way, I need to know. You're a good father. I'm a desperate father. There's a difference. Daniel took another sip of coffee. But I'm trying. That's all any of us can do, right? Keep trying. Isabella nodded slowly. Something shifted in her expression. Not pity exactly, but a kind of recognition. Can I ask you something, Daniel? Sure. What happened to your previous career? You said the company downsized, but there's more to it than that, isn't there? Daniel hesitated. Most people didn't ask follow-up questions. Most people accepted the easy answer and moved on. But Isabella was still watching him, patient and unhurried. There was an accident, he said finally. Not my fault. Another driver ran a red light and T-boned the car I was driving. My passenger, a senior executive, broke his collarbone. He was fine, ultimately, but the company's insurance premiums went up. They decided to downsize the driver pool, and I was one of the cuts. Even though you weren't responsible? The executive needed someone to blame. I was convenient. Daniel shrugged. That's how it works when you're expendable. You're not expendable, Isabella said quietly. You're a father keeping his family together against impossible odds. That takes strength most executives I know couldn't imagine. The words hit Daniel harder than he expected. He looked down at his coffee cup, blinking against sudden emotion. Thank you, he managed. Thank you. Isabella glanced at her own watch, a simple, inexpensive model that seemed at odds with her confident demeanor. You should probably head out soon. You don't want to be late. Right. Daniel stood, gathering his directions. Thank you for the coffee, and for listening. Good luck with the interview. Daniel nodded and turned to leave. He made it 3 steps before a thought struck him. He turned back. This is going to sound strange, but... He pulled out his worn wallet and extracted $3, precious dollars he couldn't afford to lose. I know you bought me coffee, but I'd feel better if I paid you back. For part of it, at least. Isabella looked at the crumpled bills in his hand. For a moment, Daniel thought she might refuse. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into her own pocket, pulled out a $5 bill, and placed it on top of Daniel's $3. If you get the job, she said, use this to take your daughter out for ice cream. Celebrate the good news. I can't. You can. And you will. Isabella's tone left no room for argument. Every victory deserves recognition, no matter how small. Daniel stared at the money in his hand. $8. Enough for 2 Sundays at Emma's favorite place on Cherry Street. If I get the job, he said softly. When you get the job. Isabella smiled. The first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, making her seem suddenly younger. You're going to do fine, Daniel Carter. Trust me. How do you know my last name? Isabella gestured to the visitor badge still sitting on the table. It's printed right there. Oh, right. Daniel felt his face warm. I should really pay more attention. Save your attention for the interview. Isabella stood as well, gathering her things. And Daniel? When they ask you why they should hire you, don't tell them about your experience or your safety record. Tell them what you told me, that you're a father who will show up every single day because someone depends on you. That kind of reliability is worth more than any credential. Daniel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He pocketed the money, grabbed his directions, and headed for the door. He didn't look back, so he didn't see Isabella watching him leave with an expression that was part curiosity, part calculation, and part something else entirely, something that might have been respect. The Harrington Logistics building was smaller than Daniel expected, a 5-story structure wedged between a parking garage and a medical office. The lobby was clean but not extravagant, with corporate motivational posters on the walls and a receptionist who smiled when he approached. Daniel Carter, here for the 10 o'clock interview. Perfect timing, Mr. Carter. Have a seat, and Mr. Rodriguez will be with you shortly. Daniel sat in one of the waiting area chairs and tried to calm his racing heart. The coffee was helping. His mind felt sharp, focused. He thought about what Isabella had said. Tell them you're a father who will show up every single day because someone depends on you. Mr. Carter? A man in his 50s, balding and friendly, extended his hand. I'm Martin Rodriguez, operations manager. Thanks for coming in. The interview room was small and windowless, with a conference table and 3 chairs. Rodriguez sat across from Daniel and opened a folder containing his resume. So, 12 years of executive driving experience, Rodriguez began. That's impressive. Can you walk me through your previous positions? Daniel talked. He explained his work with Meridian Private Transport, his unblemished safety record, his familiarity with the city's traffic patterns and alternative routes. He described his defensive driving training, his discretion with confidential conversations, his punctuality. Rodriguez nodded along, making occasional notes. And the gap in employment? The last 3 years? Here it was, the question Daniel had been dreading. He thought about Isabella's advice. Tell them who you are, not just what you've done. I have a 15-year-old daughter, Daniel said. Her mother isn't in the picture. 3 years ago, I lost my full-time position due to corporate downsizing. Since then, I've been cobbling together work wherever I could find it. Ride-sharing, deliveries, Anything flexible enough to let me be there when Emma needs me. That must have been challenging. It was necessary. Daniel met Rodriguez's eyes. But I'm ready for stability now. Emma's older, more independent, and she has dreams, college, marine biology research. I can't make those dreams happen by driving 12-hour shifts for Uber. I need a real position with real benefits and real opportunity. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. What makes you think you're a good fit for this particular position? Because you're not just hiring a driver. You're hiring someone who understands that this job is about more than getting from point A to point B. It's about representing your company, protecting your executives, being reliable every single day. Daniel paused. I show up. I work hard. And I care about the people I serve because I know what it's like when the people you depend on let you down. The room was quiet for a moment. Rodriguez studied Daniel's face. We have 6 candidates for this position, he said finally, all with excellent qualifications. What I'm hearing from you is that you're not just looking for a job, you're looking for a commitment. Yes, sir. That's good, because this position requires exactly that kind of dedication. Rodriguez closed the folder. We'll be making our decision by end of week. We'll contact you either way. Daniel stood and shook his hand. Thank you for the opportunity. Walking back to the subway, Daniel felt the $8 in his pocket. The interview had gone well, better than expected. But well didn't guarantee anything. There were 5 other candidates, all probably younger, all probably without the baggage of single parenthood. He pulled out his phone and texted Emma. Interview done, felt good, love you, kiddo. Her response came 30 seconds later. Knew you'd crush it, Dad? Mac and cheese for dinner? Daniel smiled. Your wish is my command. Well, the subway ride home took 40 minutes. Daniel spent the time mentally calculating budgets. If he got the job, when he got the job, Isabella's voice echoed in his mind. He could catch up on rent, pay down Emma's medical bills, maybe even start saving for those tests the doctor wanted. His apartment was in a neighborhood real estate agents called transitional, which meant it was affordable because nobody else wanted to live there. But it was clean, safe enough, and Emma's school was only a 15-minute walk away. Daniel unlocked the door to find Emma sprawled on their second-hand couch, laptop balanced on her knees, headphones on. She looked up when he entered and pulled the headphones down. So? Tell me everything. They said they'll decide by end of week. Daniel set his keys on the counter. The manager seemed positive, but who knows? Dad, you're amazing. They'd be stupid not to hire you. But I love your confidence, but there are 5 other candidates. Emma closed her laptop and gave him a serious look, the one that made her seem far older than 15. You know what makes you different from those other candidates? What? They're applying because they want a job. You're applying because you need to take care of someone you love. That matters. People can tell. Daniel crossed to the couch and kissed the top of her head. When did you get so wise? I have an excellent teacher. She grinned. Also, I'm starving. Mac and cheese? Coming right up. While the pasta boiled, Daniel thought about the day. The coffee shop. Isabella. The way she'd listened without judgment, offered help without condescension. He wondered if he'd ever see her again. Probably not. She'd been a brief kindness in a difficult morning, nothing more. But as he stirred the pasta, he found himself hoping that wherever she was, someone was being kind to her too. She'd seemed like someone who carried her own private burdens, hidden beneath that careful neutrality. 3 days passed. Daniel worked his Uber shifts, drove Emma to school, cooked dinners, checked his phone obsessively for missed calls. Nothing. By Friday afternoon, he'd convinced himself he hadn't gotten the job. They would have called by now if the news was good. The silence meant rejection. It always did. He was loading groceries into his car, an aging Honda with 180,000 miles and a temperamental transmission, when his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Daniel Carter? Speaking. This is Margaret Chen from Harrington Logistics. Is this a good time? Daniel's heart hammered. Yes, absolutely. Mr. Rodriguez asked me to call with some good news. We'd like to offer you the executive driver position. The salary is $52,000 annually, plus benefits and performance bonuses. Are you interested? Daniel leaned against his car, suddenly dizzy. Yes, I'm very interested. Wonderful. Can you start Monday? Monday. Yes, absolutely. Perfect. Come by at 8 a.m. for orientation and paperwork. Welcome to Harrington Logistics, Mr. Carter. Daniel stood in the parking lot for a full minute after the call ended, staring at his phone. $52,000. Benefits. A real job. Stability. He called Emma. Dad, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. I got the job, Em. Her scream of joy was so loud he had to hold the phone away from his ear. In the background, he heard her friends cheering. She must have been at school, at one of her clubs. I knew it. I knew it. Dad, I'm so proud of you. We're going out for ice cream tonight, Daniel said. My treat. Best dad ever. That night, at the ice cream shop on Cherry Street, Daniel used Isabella's $8 to buy 2 large sundaes. Emma ordered her usual, chocolate with extra whipped cream and rainbow sprinkles. Daniel got vanilla with hot fudge. To new beginnings, Emma said, raising her plastic spoon. To us, Daniel corrected, tapping his spoon against hers. Always to us. As Emma dove into her sundae, chattering about tide pools and ocean temperatures, Daniel thought again about the woman in the coffee shop. He wished he could tell her that her advice had worked, that her kindness had mattered more than she probably knew. When you get the job, use this to take your daughter out for ice cream. She'd been right. About everything. Daniel smiled and took a bite of his sundae, savoring the sweetness of victory and the even sweeter company of his daughter. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Daniel ironed his suit, polished his shoes, reviewed everything he knew about Harrington Logistics. He couldn't sleep Sunday night, his mind racing with possibilities and fears in equal measure. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Daniel kissed Emma goodbye, promised to text her updates, and drove to the Harrington building with trembling hands and a hopeful heart. The receptionist from his interview greeted him warmly. Mr. Carter, welcome. Let me get Margaret for you. Margaret Chen turned out to be a brisk, efficient woman in her 40s who walked Daniel through paperwork, building access, and company policies with military precision. You'll be assigned to one of our senior executives, she explained. Your schedule will vary based on their needs, but expect long days, early starts, late finishes. You'll have a company vehicle, a company phone, and a corporate credit card for fuel and expenses. Who will I be driving? Margaret checked her notes. Ms. Vaughn. She requested you specifically. Vaughn? The name meant nothing to Daniel. Isabella Vaughn, our CEO. Margaret looked up. She doesn't usually get involved in hiring decisions, but she personally signed off on your employment. You must have made quite an impression during your building tour. Daniel felt the floor tilt slightly beneath him. Isabella, the woman from the coffee shop. The woman who'd bought him coffee and listened to his story and given him advice, was the CEO of Harrington Logistics. Mr. Carter, are you all right? Daniel realized he'd been standing frozen for several seconds. Yes, sorry, just surprised. Ms. Vaughn can be particular about her drivers. She values discretion and reliability above all else. Margaret handed him a key fob. Your vehicle is in the executive garage, space E7, black Mercedes S-Class. Ms. Vaughn has a meeting across town at 10. That gives you an hour to familiarize yourself with the car and the route. Daniel took the key fob with numb fingers. Thank you. The executive garage was underground, pristine and quiet. Space E7 held a gleaming black Mercedes that probably cost more than Daniel had earned in the past 3 years combined. He slid into the driver's seat, and the car welcomed him with soft leather and the scent of luxury. His hands found the controls automatically, years of experience taking over. The engine purred to life. The dashboard display showed a map, calendar, and vehicle diagnostics. A calendar entry appeared, CEO Pickup, Executive Entrance, 9:45 a.m. Daniel had 15 minutes. He drove the Mercedes up from the garage and positioned it at the executive entrance, then stood beside the rear door, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Isabella Vaughn was his boss, the woman he'd asked for coffee money, the woman he'd spilled his entire life story to, was the CEO of a logistics empire. At 9:44, the executive entrance doors opened, and Isabella Vaughn walked out, dressed now in an immaculate charcoal suit, her hair professionally styled, her entire bearing transformed from coffee shop casual to corporate authority. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Isabella smiled, that same small, knowing smile from the coffee shop, and said, "Good morning, Daniel. Ready for your first day?" Daniel opened the car door, his training overriding his shock. "Good morning, Ms. Vaughn." "Isabella," she corrected, sliding into the back seat. "We've already established we're past formalities." Daniel closed her door, walked around to the driver's seat, and pulled into traffic with hands that only shook slightly. In the rearview mirror, Isabella was already absorbed in her tablet, scrolling through emails with focused intensity. But as they stopped at the first red light, she glanced up and met his eyes in the mirror. "The interview advice worked, I take it?" she asked quietly. "You knew," Daniel said, "at the coffee shop. You knew who I was, why I was there. I knew you had an interview with my company. I didn't know if you'd get the job." Isabella returned her attention to her tablet. "That part was up to you. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed your answers, made you more or less honest?" Daniel thought about it. More careful, less honest. "Exactly." Isabella tapped something on her screen. "I wanted to know who you really were, Daniel, not who you thought I wanted you to be. The coffee shop gave me that answer. And that's why you hired me. Out of pity?" The word tasted bitter in his mouth. Isabella looked up sharply. "I hired you because you're competent, experienced, and desperately reliable. The pity would have been passing you over because you were honest about your struggles." She paused. "Though if you'd like to return the $8, I'm happy to accept payment." Despite himself, Daniel smiled. "Keep it. Consider it interest on the coffee." "Deal!" They drove in silence for several minutes. Daniel navigated the morning traffic with practiced ease, finding gaps and shortcuts that saved precious minutes. He felt Isabella watching him work, evaluating his skills. "You're good at this," she said finally. 12 years of practice. "No, you're good at reading the road, anticipating problems before they develop. That's instinct, not practice." Isabella set her tablet aside. "Can I ask you something, Daniel?" "Of course." "That day in the coffee shop, if I'd offered you the job right then, would you have taken it?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "Honestly, probably not. I would have thought it was charity, felt wrong. And now? Now I know I earned it." He glanced in the mirror, "though I'm still processing the fact that my new boss saw me beg for coffee money." "You didn't beg. You asked for help when you needed it. There's a difference." Isabella's voice was matter of fact. "Most people are too proud to ask. They'd rather suffer in silence than admit they're struggling. You chose honesty over pride. That takes courage." They arrived at the meeting destination, a high-rise office building in the financial district. Daniel pulled up to the curb and opened Isabella's door. "I'll be 2 hours," she said, stepping out. "There's a coffee shop on the corner if you need anything." "I'm fine. Thank you, Ms. Vaughn." "Isabella?" she reminded him again. Then she was gone, disappearing into the building with the confident stride of someone who owned every room she entered. Daniel sat in the Mercedes and tried to process the morning's revelations. His mysterious coffee shop benefactor was his boss. The woman who'd listened to his struggles now controlled his paycheck. The stranger who'd given him $8 for ice cream was worth. He pulled out his phone and Googled Isabella Vaughn net worth, approximately $300 million. The number didn't seem real. Nothing about this day seemed real. But the car was real. The job was real. And Emma's text message, "How's day one, Dad?" was very, very real. Daniel texted back, "Interesting. Tell you all about it tonight. Love you." The 2 hours passed slowly. Daniel reviewed the car's features, studied tomorrow's calendar entries, and tried not to overthink the surreal turn his life had taken. When Isabella emerged from the building, she looked tired, angry even. Her jaw was tight, her movements sharp. Daniel opened her door without comment. Sometimes silence was the best service he could offer. They were halfway back to the Harrington building when Isabella spoke. "My father called during the meeting." Daniel said nothing, sensing she needed to talk more than she needed a response. "He wants me to attend a charity gala next month." with Trevor Blackstone, a lawyer whose family owns a competing logistics firm. It's the third time this year he's arranged for us to, coincidentally, be at the same event. Isabella's voice was brittle. He thinks I should marry Trevor, merge the companies, create a dynasty. What do you think? Daniel asked carefully. I think Trevor Blackstone is a mediocre lawyer with an inflated sense of his own importance. I think my father values business connections more than his daughter's happiness. And I think I'm tired of being treated like an asset to be traded. The vulnerability in her voice surprised Daniel. This wasn't the polished CEO speaking. This was the woman from the coffee shop, the one who'd listened to his problems with quiet understanding. For what it's worth, Daniel said, I think you deserve someone who values you for who you are, not what you're worth. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Thank you, Daniel. Just returning the favor. You listened to me. Seems only fair. They arrived back at Harrington Logistics. Daniel opened Isabella's door and she stepped out, then paused. Daniel? Tomorrow morning I have an early meeting. Pick me up at my residence at 6:30. Of course. I'll need the address. Isabella pulled a business card from her bag and wrote on the back. See you then. Daniel watched her walk into the building, then looked at the card. Her personal address was in Thornhill Estates, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. He drove the Mercedes back to the garage, completed his end-of-day checklist, and headed home to Emma. That night, over reheated pizza, he told her about his day. Most of it, anyway. He left out the part about Isabella being the woman from the coffee shop. That felt too strange to explain, even to himself. So your boss is like super rich? Emma asked, eyes wide. Apparently. But she's nice? Daniel thought about Isabella's tired anger in the car, her quiet thank you when he'd offered understanding instead of solutions. Yeah, he said. I think she is. Good, because you deserve a boss who appreciates you, Dad. Daniel smiled and stole a piece of pepperoni from Emma's slice. When did you get so wise? I told you, excellent teacher. That night, lying in bed, Daniel stared at the ceiling and thought about the strange path that had brought him here. A desperate morning in a coffee shop. A woman who'd seen past his worn suit to the father beneath. A conversation that had somehow led to a job, a Mercedes, and a glimpse into a life so different from his own, it might as well have been another planet. He thought about Isabella, trapped by expectations and family pressure, surrounded by wealth but seemingly starving for genuine connection. And he thought about what she'd said. You chose honesty over pride. That takes courage. Maybe courage was all any of them had in the end. The courage to ask for help. The courage to keep trying. The courage to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. Daniel closed his eyes and, for the first time in months, fell asleep without worrying about money or Emma's health or whether he'd make it through another week. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, he had a job, a daughter who believed in him, and $8 worth of ice cream memories. It was enough. For now, it was more than enough. The alarm went off at 5:15 the next morning, dragging Daniel from a dreamless sleep. He lay in the darkness for a moment, disoriented, before memory crashed back. 6:30 pickup, Thornhill Estates, Isabella Vaughn's private residence. He showered quickly, dressed in his suit, and left a note for Emma on the kitchen counter. Early meeting, cereal in the cabinet, milk in the fridge. Have a great day at school. Love, Dad. The drive to Thornhill Estates took 40 minutes through empty pre-dawn streets. Daniel had driven past this neighborhood before. Everyone had. But he'd never actually entered it. The houses here weren't just homes. They were statements, monuments to success. Each one sat behind iron gates and manicured lawns that probably cost more to maintain than Daniel's annual salary. Isabella's address led him to a modern glass and steel structure that seemed to defy gravity, all clean lines and enormous windows. A security gate barred the entrance. Daniel rolled down his window and pressed the intercom button. Daniel Carter for Ms. Vaughn. The gate swung open silently. He pulled the Mercedes into the circular driveway and killed the engine. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see minimalist furniture and abstract art. Everything looked expensive and deliberately impersonal, like a photograph in an architecture magazine. At exactly 6:30, the front door opened. Isabella emerged wearing a navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Her hair was pulled back severely, and she wore makeup that emphasized her sharp cheekbones. She looked like she'd been awake for hours. Daniel opened the car door. "Good morning." "Morning." Isabella slid into the back seat without meeting his eyes. She immediately pulled out her tablet and began typing. Daniel recognized the signals. She wasn't in the mood for conversation. That was fine. He could do silence. They drove through the waking city as the sky shifted from black to deep blue to pale gray. Isabella worked steadily, her fingers flying across the tablet screen. Occasionally, she'd make a sound of frustration or satisfaction, but she didn't speak. 20 minutes into the drive, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her jaw tightened. "Vaughn," she answered, her voice clipped and professional. Daniel couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but he watched Isabella's reflection in the rearview mirror. Her expression grew progressively colder. "Father, I've already told you my decision. No, I will not reconsider. Because Trevor Blackstone is not interested in me as a person. He's interested in a merger. That's exactly my point. You see me the same way. I have a meeting to prepare for. We'll discuss this later." She ended the call and immediately returned to her tablet, but Daniel noticed her hands were shaking slightly. They arrived at the meeting location, a hotel conference center downtown. Daniel opened her door. 3 hours, Isabella said. Maybe 4 if the negotiation runs long. I'll be here. She walked away without another word, her heels clicking against the pavement with military precision. Daniel settled in for a long wait. He'd brought a thermos of coffee and a book Emma had recommended, something about ocean conservation. He was 20 pages in when someone tapped on his window. A man in a chauffeur's uniform stood outside, grinning. He was older than Daniel, probably in his 60s, with gray hair and laugh lines around his eyes. Daniel rolled down the window. "Can I help you?" "You're new," the man said. It wasn't a question. "Driving for Vaughn?" "Started yesterday." The man's grin widened. "Marcus Green, I drive for Richard Chen, CEO of Pacific Shipping. That's his car over there." He gestured to a black Bentley parked 3 spaces down. "We're in the same meeting. Merger negotiations. Gonna be a long morning." "Daniel Carter." They shook hands through the window. "You want some company, or do you prefer the solitary life?" Daniel hesitated, then smiled. "Company sounds good." Marcus walked around and slid into the passenger seat. He pulled out his own thermos, significantly nicer than Daniel's battered model, and poured himself a cup. "So, how'd you land the Vaughn job? That's one of the hardest gigs to get in this city. She goes through drivers like tissue paper." "I didn't know that." "Oh yeah, she's particular. Had one guy last year fired him after 2 weeks because he played talk radio without asking first. Another one made the mistake of commenting on her personal phone calls. Gone by end of day." Marcus took a sip of coffee. "She values privacy above everything. And loyalty." Daniel processed this information. "She seems intense." Intense is one word for it. Brilliant is another. Isabella Vaughn built that company from nothing, you know. Her father founded it, sure, but it was going bankrupt when she took over 8 years ago. She was 27. Everyone said she was too young, too inexperienced. She proved them all wrong. How? Ruthless efficiency. She cut dead weight, renegotiated every contract, personally courted new clients. Worked 18-hour days for 3 years straight. Marcus shook his head admiringly. The woman's a machine, but the job cost her. You see it in her eyes sometimes. She's exhausted, running on fumes and pure willpower. Daniel thought about Isabella's shaking hands after the call with her father. Does she have anyone, friends, family support? Her parents are more business partners than family, no siblings, no real friends that I've seen, just business associates and people who want something from her. Marcus looked at Daniel curiously. Why do you ask? Just trying to understand my employer. Word of advice? Don't try to understand her. Just do your job well. Keep your mouth shut about what you see and hear, and you might last longer than the others. They talked for another hour, trading stories about clients and traffic nightmares and the peculiar loneliness of spending your days in someone else's luxury. Marcus had been driving for 30 years. He'd seen everything: affairs, business deals, meltdowns, celebrations. He spoke about it all with a kind of philosophical detachment. You become invisible after a while, Marcus said. They forget you're there. You're just part of the car, like the steering wheel. And you hear things. Private things. You learn to forget what you hear, or this job will eat you alive. Has it? Daniel asked. Eaten you alive? Marcus considered the question. Some days. But then I think about my pension, my grandkids' college funds, and I remember why I do it. We all make compromises, right? The trick is knowing which ones you can live with. The meeting ran 5 hours. When Isabella finally emerged, she looked drained. Her perfect posture had wilted slightly, and there were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there this morning. Marcus noticed her expression and whistled low. Rough negotiations. I'll bet Chen's in the same shape. He clapped Daniel on the shoulder. Good luck, kid. You're gonna need it. Daniel opened Isabella's door. She slid in without a word and closed her eyes, leaning her head against the seat. Home? Daniel asked. Office. I have calls scheduled. Ms. Vaughn? Isabella. Isabella, you look exhausted. Maybe office, please. Her voice was polite but final. They drove in silence. Daniel watched her in the mirror. She kept her eyes closed, her breathing slow and deliberate, as if she were counting each inhale and exhale. Halfway to the office, she spoke without opening her eyes. The merger fell through. They wanted majority control. I refused. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was the right decision. She opened her eyes and met his gaze in the mirror. Though my father will disagree. Loudly. Is that who'll be calling? Among others. Isabella's smile was bitter. The board. The investors. Everyone who thinks they know how to run my company better than I do. Daniel made a decision. There's a park 2 blocks from here. Pine Grove. It has a pond. Why are you telling me this? Because sometimes, before you face the firing squad, it helps to breathe air that doesn't smell like conference rooms and ambition. Isabella stared at him for a long moment. Then, surprising them both, she said, Show me. Pine Grove Park was nearly empty at noon on a Tuesday. A few joggers circled the paths, and a woman fed ducks at the pond, but otherwise they had the place to themselves. Daniel parked in the small lot. Isabella stepped out before he could open her door, and they walked toward the pond without discussion or plan. I used to come here as a kid, Daniel said, when things got overwhelming. Emma and I still come sometimes, though not as often as we used to. Your daughter, how is she? Good, great actually. The stability's helping. She's less worried, sleeping better. He paused. I wanted to thank you for the job, for the chance. You earned it, Daniel. I told you that. They reached the pond and stopped at the edge. The water was gray-green and still, reflecting the overcast sky like tarnished silver. Can I ask you something? Isabella said quietly. Of course. Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? Like you're playing a role that doesn't quite fit? Daniel thought about his worn suit and his aging Honda, about standing in line unable to afford coffee. Every single day for the past 3 years. And now? Now I feel like maybe I'm finding my way back to the life I'm supposed to have. Or building a new one. I'm not sure which. Isabella picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in her palm. I've been CEO for 8 years. 8 years of board meetings and negotiations and strategic planning. 8 years of proving myself over and over again. She threw the stone. It skipped once, twice, then sank. And I still feel like I'm pretending. Like any moment someone will realize I'm making it all up as I go. Imposter syndrome. Is that what they call it? Isabella's laugh was hollow. I thought it was just failure waiting to happen. You're not failing. Marcus, another driver I met this morning, he said you saved your company from bankruptcy. Built it into something remarkable. Marcus talks too much. But there was no heat in her words. Did he also tell you I have no life outside of work? That I've sacrificed everything, relationships, friendships, any hope of normalcy, for quarterly earnings reports? He said you work hard. I work constantly. There's a difference. Isabella picked up another stone. My father called this morning. Again. The 4th time this week. He wants me to reconsider Trevor Blackstone. Says I'm being stubborn and emotional. Says a good CEO puts the company before personal preferences. What do you want? That's the problem. I don't know anymore. She threw the second stone harder. It sank immediately. I used to know exactly what I wanted: success, respect, proof that I was more than just my father's daughter. But now I have all that, and it feels empty. Daniel understood that emptiness. He'd felt it in the years after Emma's mother left, when he'd been so focused on survival that he'd forgotten how to actually live. Can I tell you something my daughter said to me last week? He asked. Please. She said, Dad, you're always so busy being responsible that you forget to be happy. She's 15 and she's already wiser than I'll ever be. Daniel picked up his own stone. I think maybe we both need to remember that being successful and being happy aren't mutually exclusive. They feel mutually exclusive. Only because we've convinced ourselves they are. They stood in silence, throwing stones into the pond. Isabella's throws got progressively better. 3 skips, then 4, then 5. When she finally managed 7 skips, she turned to Daniel with a genuine smile. I haven't done this since I was a child, she said. Done what? Skipped stones? Wasted time. She said it wonderingly, like she was tasting a foreign word. Just stood outside in the middle of a workday doing something that has no purpose except pleasure. It's not wasting time. It's living. Isabella's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her smile faded. My father, the office, reality calling. Do you want to answer? She looked at the phone, then at the pond, then back at Daniel. No, she said slowly. Not yet. Give me 5 more minutes of wasted time. They stayed for 20. When they finally returned to the car, Isabella seemed lighter somehow. Not happy exactly, but less burdened. She settled into the back seat and said, Thank you, Daniel, for the detour. Anytime. I might hold you to that. The afternoon was a blur of phone calls and meetings. Daniel drove Isabella from the office to a client lunch, to the office again, to a supplier negotiation across town. Between stops, she worked on her tablet or talked on the phone in rapid-fire sentences that revealed nothing and everything about the stress she carried. By 6 o'clock, Daniel had been driving for over 12 hours. His back ached and his eyes burned, but he didn't complain. This was the job. This was stability. One more stop, Isabella said as they left the supplier meeting. Then I'll let you go home to your daughter. Where to? She gave him an address in the medical district. They drove through rush-hour traffic, inching forward in stop-and-go frustration. Isabella made more calls, her voice growing progressively sharper with each conversation. When they finally arrived, Daniel realized they were at a private medical office, high-end, judging by the building's polished exterior. Isabella stepped out, then hesitated. Daniel, I need you to come inside for a moment. Of course. He followed her into the building, through a lobby that smelled like lavender and money, to an elevator that rose silently to the 3rd floor. The hallway was empty except for a receptionist behind a desk. Miss Vaughn, the receptionist said warmly. Dr. Morrison is ready for you, and you must be Mr. Carter? Daniel glanced at Isabella, confused. I made an appointment for your daughter, Isabella said quietly. The tests her doctor recommended. They're expensive, I know, but this clinic offers payment plans. I can't accept this. You can and you will. Consider it a signing bonus or an advance on your salary, whatever makes you comfortable. Isabella's tone left no room for argument. Emma needs these tests, Daniel. Pride shouldn't prevent her from getting proper medical care. I can't afford. You can afford the payment plan, $500 a month for 6 months. I've already verified it with your salary. She turned to the receptionist. Give Mr. Carter the paperwork, please. The receptionist handed Daniel a folder. Inside were consent forms, payment agreements, and appointment scheduling options. I don't understand, Daniel said slowly. Why would you do this? Because you told me in a coffee shop that your daughter might be seriously ill, and you couldn't afford to find out. Because I can help and I choose to. Isabella's voice softened. Because sometimes the system is broken, and we have to fix it ourselves, one person at a time. Daniel stared at the paperwork, emotion welling in his chest. I don't know what to say. Say you'll bring Emma in for testing, Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. Dr. Morrison is one of the best pediatric specialists in the city. Thank you, The words felt inadequate. Thank you, Isabella. She nodded, suddenly looking uncomfortable with his gratitude. I'll be in the car. Take your time with the paperwork. Daniel spent 20 minutes filling out forms with trembling hands. The payment plan was exactly as Isabella had said, manageable, if tight. He could make it work. He had to make it work. When he returned to the car, Isabella was on her phone again. She ended the call when he slid into the driver's seat. All set? She asked. Yes, I can't thank you enough. Then don't. Just drive me home. I'm exhausted. They drove to Thornhill Estates in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Comfortable, almost companionable. When they arrived at her house, Isabella gathered her things. Same time tomorrow? I'll be here. She opened her door, then paused. Daniel, what you said at the pond about being successful and being happy, do you really believe that's possible? I'm starting to, he said honestly. Aren't you? Isabella considered this. Ask me again in a few months. She disappeared into her glass and steel house, and Daniel drove home to Emma. That night, he told his daughter about the appointment. She cried, not from fear, but from relief. They'd been living with uncertainty for so long that even the possibility of answers felt like a gift. Your boss did this? Emma asked, wiping her eyes. She did. She must really believe in you, Dad. Daniel thought about Isabella's shaking hands and bitter smile, about her admission of emptiness at the pond. I think maybe we believe in each other. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Daniel picked Isabella up early, drove her to meetings and appointments, waited in parking lots and coffee shops, and drove her home late. They talked sometimes, brief exchanges about traffic or weather or Emma's upcoming tests. Other times they drove in silence. But the silence changed. It became less awkward, more natural, like two people who'd learned they didn't need to fill every moment with words. Daniel learned Isabella's habits. She drank her coffee black with exactly 1 sugar. She hated small talk but loved good questions. She worked constantly, but sometimes stared out the window with an expression of such profound sadness that Daniel ached for her. Isabella learned Daniel's routines too. She scheduled meetings to ensure he could pick Emma up from school twice a week. She never called him after 8 p.m., respecting his time with his daughter, and she always asked about Emma's health. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. Daniel brought Emma to Dr. Morrison's office, and Isabella was already there, waiting in the lobby. Ms. Vaughn, Emma said, eyes wide. Dad said you arranged this, but I didn't think you'd actually be here. I wanted to make sure everything went smoothly. Isabella shook Emma's hand formally, but her smile was genuine. Your father talks about you constantly. It's nice to finally meet the famous marine biologist. Emma blushed. I'm not famous. I'm just interested in oceans. Interest is how all great careers begin. Dr. Morrison was a kind woman in her 50s who explained each test thoroughly before performing it. Blood work, ECG, chest X-ray, pulmonary function tests. Emma handled it all with quiet bravery, only squeezing Daniel's hand during the needle stick. We'll have results in a few days, Dr. Morrison said afterward. I'll call as soon as everything's processed. In the parking lot, Isabella turned to Emma. How are you feeling? Nervous, but glad it's done. Emma looked at Isabella with unusual directness. Why did you help us? You don't even know me. I know your father. That's enough. But why do you care about him? He's just your driver. Emma, Daniel started. No, it's a fair question. Isabella considered her answer carefully. Your father is one of the few genuinely honest people I've ever met. In my world, that's rare and valuable. And he's raising someone remarkable while facing impossible circumstances. That deserves support. Emma studied Isabella for a long moment. Then she did something completely unexpected. She hugged her. Isabella stood frozen, clearly shocked. Then, slowly her arms came up and she hugged Emma back. Thank you, Emma whispered, for caring about my dad. He deserves people who care about him. When Emma pulled away, Isabella's eyes were suspiciously bright. He does, she agreed quietly. He really does. Monday morning, Daniel picked Isabella up as usual, but instead of her typical professional greeting, she said, Your daughter is wonderful. She is. Thank you again for Saturday. She asked me a good question. Why do I care? Isabella was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about that. And I realized that for the first time in years, I'm around someone who doesn't want anything from me except honest conversation. You don't care about my money or my position or my connections. You see me as a person. She met his eyes in the mirror. That's addictive, Daniel. Actual human connection. I feel the same way, he admitted. Everyone in my life needs something from me. Emma needs a father, my landlord needs rent, bill collectors need payment. But with you, I can just be, drive and talk and exist without the weight of constant responsibility. We're using each other then, for escape. Is that terrible? No, Isabella said softly. I think it might be the healthiest thing either of us has done in years. They drove through the city as dawn painted the sky pink and gold. Daniel felt something shifting between them, a recognition that their relationship had evolved beyond employer and employee into something harder to define, something that felt dangerously close to friendship, or maybe something more. The thought scared him. Isabella Vaughn lived in a different world, a world of wealth and power and expectations he couldn't begin to understand. The gap between them was too wide, too fundamental. But in the quiet morning car, with classical music playing softly and the city waking around them, the gap didn't feel so wide. It felt almost crossable. That afternoon, while Daniel waited during one of Isabella's meetings, his phone rang. Dr. Morrison. Mr. Carter, I have Emma's results. His heart stopped. And? Good news, mostly. The chest pains and dizziness are from stress-induced anxiety and mild anemia. Very treatable. We'll need to adjust her diet and monitor her stress levels, but there's nothing seriously wrong. Daniel closed his eyes, relief flooding through him. Thank you. Thank you so much. When Isabella emerged from her meeting 2 hours later, Daniel was still sitting in the car, grinning. You look happy, she observed. Emma's results came back. She's okay. Anemia and anxiety, but nothing serious, nothing life-threatening. Isabella's face transformed. Daniel, that's wonderful. It is. It really is. He started the car, still smiling. I don't know how to repay you for this, for the tests, for the relief, for everything. You don't repay kindness, Daniel. You pass it forward. They were halfway to the office when Isabella's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her expression hardened. My father. Again. She answered. What is it now? Daniel couldn't hear the other side, but he watched Isabella's face cycle through irritation, disbelief, and finally cold anger. You did what? Her voice was ice. Without consulting me? It's my company, Father. I don't care what the board thinks. No, I will not smooth this over by dating Trevor Blackstone. This conversation is over. She ended the call and immediately threw her phone onto the seat beside her. It bounced once and fell to the floor. Damn him, she whispered. Damn him. Daniel pulled over into a parking lot. What happened? My father scheduled a meeting with the Blackstone family. Dinner, Thursday night. He told them I'd be there. He told them I was reconsidering Trevor's proposal. Her hands clenched into fists. He's trying to force my hand. If I don't show up, I insult the Blackstones and potentially lose a major client. If I do show up, I'm tacitly agreeing to his matchmaking schemes. What are you going to do? I don't know. Isabella leaned her head back against the seat. I'm so tired of fighting, Daniel. Every day is a battle. With my father, with the board, with expectations. I just want one day where I can make my own choices without consequences. Daniel made a decision. Then take it. What? Take the day. Call in sick Thursday. Tell them all to handle it themselves. I can't just... Why not? You're the CEO. You've earned a day off. Isabella stared at him. And do what? Whatever you want. Sleep in, read a book, go to the beach. Daniel surprised himself with his next words. Spend the day being Isabella, not Ms. Vaughn. She was quiet for a long time. Then slowly, she smiled. That sounds dangerous. The best things usually are. Thursday morning, Daniel received a text from Isabella. Change of plans. Pick me up at 9 a.m. Casual clothes. We're playing hooky. He showed up at her house at 9 sharp, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of his suit. When Isabella emerged, he almost didn't recognize her. She wore faded jeans, a soft blue sweater, and sneakers. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, freer. "Where are we going?" she asked, sliding into the front passenger seat instead of the back. "That's up to you. What does Isabella want to do on her day off?" She thought about it. "I want to see the ocean." They drove to the coast, an hour outside the city. The beach was empty except for a few dog walkers and early morning surfers. Daniel parked in the sandy lot, and they walked down to the water together. Isabella took off her shoes and stepped into the surf. The cold water made her gasp, then laugh, a real, uninhibited sound Daniel had never heard from her before. "When was the last time you went to the beach?" he asked. "I genuinely can't remember. Years, maybe a decade." She turned to face him, the wind whipping her hair. "This is perfect, Daniel. Thank you." They walked along the shore for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Emma's dreams of marine biology. Isabella's memories of childhood summers before business consumed her family. Daniel's fears about being a good father. Isabella's admission that she was terrified of becoming like her parents. Successful, but hollow. "Do you think it's possible to have it all?" Isabella asked as they sat on a piece of driftwood, watching waves crash against the sand. "Career and happiness? Success and real relationships?" "I think it's possible to have what matters most to you. The trick is figuring out what that actually is." "What matters most to you?" "Emma, her health, her happiness, her future." Daniel picked up a shell and examined it. "But I'm starting to realize I need things too. Not just to be her father, but to be myself, to have connections, to feel like I'm living, not just surviving." Isabella nodded slowly. "I spent so long building my career that I forgot to build a life alongside it. And now I have everything I thought I wanted and nothing that actually matters." "That's not true. You have a company you saved from ruin, employees who depend on you, the respect of your industry. But no one to come home to, no one who cares if I had a good day or a terrible one, no one who sees me instead of my job title." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm so lonely, Daniel. I'm surrounded by people all day, every day, and I'm desperately, crushingly lonely." Without thinking, Daniel reached over and took her hand. Her fingers were cold from the ocean breeze. "You're not alone right now," he said quietly. Isabella looked at their joined hands, then at his face. Something passed between them. Recognition, connection, possibility. "No," she whispered. "I'm not." They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, watching the ocean breathe in and out. The world felt very far away. Eventually, reality intruded. Isabella's phone buzzed repeatedly in her pocket. She ignored it the first 5 times, then finally checked. 17 missed calls, 32 texts. She laughed, but it sounded tired. "I think my father may have realized I'm not coming to dinner." "Regrets?" "Not even slightly." She turned off her phone entirely. "I haven't felt this peaceful in years. That's worth whatever consequences are waiting." They stayed at the beach until sunset, then found a small seafood restaurant overlooking the water. Over fish and chips and cheap beer, they talked like old friends. Isabella told him about her first year as CEO, when she'd worked so hard she'd ended up in the hospital with exhaustion. Daniel told her about Emma's mother leaving, about the years of anger and confusion that followed. "Do you still love her?" Isabella asked. "Emma's mother?" "No, I don't think I ever really did. We were young and reckless, and then suddenly we had a baby and no idea what we were doing." Daniel took a sip of beer. "I loved who I thought she was. But when things got hard, I realized I didn't know her at all." That's frightening, building a life with someone only to discover they're a stranger. "Have you ever been in love?" Isabella considered the question. "I thought so once, in college. But he wanted the version of me that smiled and agreed with everything he said. When I started showing ambition, started disagreeing, he left." She traced patterns in the condensation on her beer bottle. "I learned early that people prefer the idea of me to the reality." "I prefer the reality," Daniel said. Isabella's eyes met his. "I know. That's what makes you dangerous." "Dangerous?" "To my carefully constructed walls, my defenses, My ability to keep everyone at a safe distance. She smiled sadly. You make me want to let someone in. That's terrifying. It doesn't have to be. Doesn't it? Look at us, Daniel. I'm your boss. You're my employee. I'm worth $300 million, and you're a single father barely making ends meet. The power dynamic alone is impossible. Add in my father's expectations, the company's reputation, the inevitable scandal. She shook her head. Whatever this is between us, it can't go anywhere. Because of money? Circumstances? Because the real world doesn't work like fairy tales. Because I have responsibilities, and you have a daughter to protect, and we both have too much to lose. Daniel knew she was right, but sitting across from her in the warm restaurant light, watching her guard come down bit by bit, he couldn't bring himself to care about the impossibility of it all. What if we just took it one day at a time, he suggested. No labels, no pressure, just this. Friendship, honesty, moments stolen from our complicated lives. That's a terrible idea. Probably. It can't last. Maybe not. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. Then she raised her beer bottle. To terrible ideas and stolen moments. Daniel clinked his bottle against hers. To one day at a time. They drove back to the city in the darkness, the radio playing softly. Isabella fell asleep in the passenger seat, her head tilted against the window. Daniel glanced over at her sleeping face and felt something shift in his chest, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself in years. Hope. Dangerous, foolish, impossible hope. When they reached her house, he gently touched her shoulder. We're here. Isabella woke slowly, disoriented. What time is it? Almost 11. She gathered her things, then paused with her hand on the door. Thank you for today, for the escape. Any time. Daniel? About what I said at dinner? We don't have to define it, whatever it is. Isabella smiled. One day at a time. One day at a time. She leaned over and kissed his cheek, quick and soft and completely unexpected. Then she was gone, disappearing into her house before Daniel could process what had happened. He sat in the car for a full minute, his hand pressed to his cheek where her lips had been, knowing with absolute certainty that everything had just changed, and that there was no going back. The kiss lingered in Daniel's mind all weekend like a ghost he couldn't exorcise. He replayed it constantly. The soft press of Isabella's lips against his cheek, the faint scent of her perfume, the way she'd fled into her house as if she'd surprised herself as much as him. Emma noticed his distraction on Saturday morning over breakfast. Dad, you've been stirring that coffee for 5 minutes. It's definitely mixed by now. Daniel looked down at his cup, startled. Sorry, just thinking. About work? Something like that. Emma studied him with eyes far too perceptive for 15. Is everything okay? With your boss, I mean? You've seemed different lately. Different how? I don't know. Lighter, maybe? Like you're not carrying the whole world on your shoulders anymore. She took a bite of toast. It's nice. You should stay this way. Daniel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I'm trying, kiddo. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Daniel drove to Thornhill Estates at 6:30 as usual, his stomach churning with uncertainty. Would Isabella acknowledge what had happened? Pretend it never occurred? Fire him for crossing an invisible line? She emerged from her house in full CEO armor, sleek black suit, hair pulled back severely, expression unreadable. She slid into the back seat without meeting his eyes. Good morning, she said, her voice professionally neutral. Good morning, Ms. Vaughn. The formality felt like a slap. They drove in silence, the air thick with everything unsaid. Isabella worked on her tablet, her fingers moving with mechanical precision. Daniel navigated morning traffic and tried not to feel like he'd imagined the entire day at the beach. It wasn't until they were stopped at a red light that Isabella spoke. I need to apologize for Thursday night. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. You don't? I do. What I did was inappropriate. You work for me, and I put you in an uncomfortable position. It won't happen again. The words were right, professional, exactly what she should say. But Daniel heard the hollowness beneath them. Is that what you really want? He asked quietly. To pretend nothing happened? It's what's necessary. That's not the same thing. The light turned green. Daniel drove, and Isabella returned to her tablet, but he caught her watching him in the mirror twice, her expression troubled. The week that followed was torture. They maintained perfect professional distance, polite, cordial, completely impersonal. Isabella stopped asking about Emma. Daniel stopped offering observations about the city or the weather. They existed in the same space like strangers who happened to share a car. It was Marcus who finally called Daniel out on it. They were waiting during another long meeting, both parked in the same lot. Marcus knocked on Daniel's window and invited himself into the passenger seat, as had become their custom. "You look like someone killed your dog," Marcus observed. "What happened?" "Nothing happened." "That's the worst lie I've heard all week, and I've been driving a CEO who's currently lying to his wife about where he spends his Tuesday afternoons." Marcus pulled out his thermos. "Trouble with Vaughn?" "I don't want to talk about it." "Which means it's definitely about Vaughn." Marcus poured himself coffee. "Let me guess. You're catching feelings. She's catching feelings. But she's your boss and you're her driver, and the whole thing is impossible." Daniel stared at him. "How? Kid, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen it all. The problem isn't that it's happening. The problem is what you do about it." "There's nothing to do about it. She made that clear." Did she? Or did she say what she thinks she's supposed to say because she's terrified?" Marcus took a sip. "These people, the CEOs, the executives, the ones with money and power, they're more scared than anyone. They have more to lose. Every relationship is transactional. Every friendship has ulterior motives. When something real comes along, they don't know how to handle it. So what am I supposed to do? Just wait around hoping she changes her mind? No. You decide what you want and whether it's worth the risk. Because make no mistake, if this goes anywhere, there will be risks. Scandal, judgment. Her family will come after you with everything they have." Daniel thought about Isabella's father, about the pressure she faced constantly. "I can't ask her to choose between her family and whatever this is." "You're not asking, she's choosing. The question is whether you'll be there when she does." Before Daniel could respond, Marcus's phone buzzed. "Chen's done. Good luck, kid. You're going to need it." That evening, as Daniel drove Isabella home, she finally broke the silence. "My father wants to meet you." Daniel nearly swerved into the next lane. "What?" "He's heard rumors. About us. About the day I skipped the Blackstone dinner." Isabella's voice was flat. "He wants to assess the situation personally." "What did you tell him?" "That there's nothing to assess. That you're my driver, and any rumors are baseless gossip." "Is that what we are? Baseless gossip?" Isabella met his eyes in the mirror. "I don't know what we are, Daniel, but I know what we can't be." "Because of your father?" "Because of reality. Because I live in a world where every decision is scrutinized, every relationship is ammunition for my enemies, every moment of happiness becomes a weapon someone can use against me." Her voice cracked slightly. "I can't drag you into that." "I won't." "Don't I get a say in what I'm dragged into?" "Not when it could destroy your life, not when you have Emma to protect." They pulled up to her house. Isabella gathered her things, but didn't immediately leave. "Thursday night," she said quietly. "The beach, the dinner, the conversation. It was the best day I've had in years. Maybe ever. But it was also a fantasy, a brief escape from reality. And reality is waiting for both of us." "What if we made it real? What if we stopped running from it?" "Then we'd both get hurt. And I care about you too much to let that happen." She left before Daniel could argue, disappearing into her glass house like Cinderella fleeing the ball. The next morning, everything changed. Daniel arrived at 6:30 to find Isabella's father waiting in the driveway. Richard Vaughn was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of face that revealed nothing. He stood beside a black Cadillac, arms crossed, watching Daniel approach. "Mr. Carter, I presume?" Daniel parked and stepped out. "Mr. Vaughn, Isabella didn't mention you'd be here." "She doesn't know." Richard's smile was cold. "I wanted to speak with you privately, man to man." Every instinct told Daniel this was a trap. "About what?" "About my daughter. About the inappropriate relationship you've been cultivating." Richard stepped closer. "Don't bother denying it. I have people who keep me informed. The beach trip, the missed dinner. The way she looks at you when she thinks no one's watching. I haven't. Let me be very clear, Mr. Carter. Isabella has a responsibility to this family, to our company, to our legacy. She cannot afford to be distracted by dalliances with the help. The contempt in that last word made Daniel's jaw clench. I'm not a dalliance, and I'm certainly not the help. No? Then what are you? A driver? A single father living paycheck to paycheck. A man with nothing to offer except complications. Richard pulled an envelope from his jacket. Here's what I'm offering you. $50,000. A glowing recommendation letter, and a promise that I'll personally ensure you find employment with any company in this city. In exchange, you resign, today. And you stay away from my daughter. Daniel stared at the envelope. $50,000. Enough to pay off Emma's medical bills, buy a reliable car, maybe even start saving for college. You're trying to buy me off. I'm offering you a solution that benefits everyone. You get financial security. Isabella avoids a scandal that could damage her reputation and our business relationships. Everyone wins. Except for what Isabella wants. Isabella wants stability and success. She wants to prove herself to this family and this industry. A relationship with you threatens all of that. Richard's voice hardened. Do you really think you can give her the life she deserves? The social status? The security? The future her position demands? I think I can give her honesty. Respect. Someone who sees her as more than a business asset. How noble, and how utterly naive. Richard thrust the envelope toward Daniel. Take the money. Walk away. Let Isabella focus on what actually matters. Daniel looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then he pushed Richard's hand away. No. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not leaving unless Isabella asks me to, and she hasn't. Richard's expression turned to ice. Then you're a fool, and fools don't last long in my daughter's world. He climbed into his Cadillac and drove away, leaving Daniel standing in the driveway with his heart pounding and his hands shaking. Isabella emerged from her house 10 minutes later, her expression stormy. My father was here. I know. What did he say to you? He offered me money to leave, $50,000. Daniel met her eyes. I turned him down. Isabella closed her eyes briefly, pain flashing across her face. Daniel, you shouldn't have what? Refused to be bought? Decided that some things matter more than money? He opened her car door. I'm not leaving unless you fire me. And even then, I'm not leaving you. Not unless that's what you actually want. It's not about what I want. It's exactly about what you want. For once in your life, what do you want, Isabella? She stared at him, tears bright in her eyes. I want you. I want this. But I'm terrified of what it will cost both of us. Then we figure it out together. You don't understand the forces we're up against. So help me understand. Stop protecting me and talk to me. Trust me. Isabella wiped her eyes impatiently. Get in the car. We need to talk. Really talk. And we can't do it here. They drove to Pine Grove Park, to the same spot they'd visited weeks ago. The morning was cold and gray, the pond reflecting the overcast sky like hammered steel. Isabella stood at the water's edge, her arms wrapped around herself. My family built their fortune on logistics and shipping, but they've maintained it through strategic alliances. Marriages, business partnerships, carefully cultivated relationships with other powerful families. It's how this world works. I know that. No, you don't. Not really. She picked up a stone. When I became CEO, I made a deal with my father. I could run the company my way, make my own decisions, prove myself on my own terms. In exchange, I would eventually marry someone he approved of, someone who would strengthen our family's position. Trevor Blackstone. Or someone like him. Someone with the right connections, the right background, the right last name. She threw the stone. I agreed because I was 27 and desperate to prove I could run the company. I thought I had time. I thought maybe I could find a way out before the debt came due. And now? Now my father is calling in that debt. He's threatening to use his board influence to undermine me if I don't comply. And worse, he's threatening to destroy anyone who gets in his way. She turned to face Daniel. He will come after you, Daniel. He'll dig up everything he can find, use it against you. He'll make sure you never work in this city again. He might even... Her voice broke. He might try to take Emma from you, claim you're an unfit parent because of our relationship. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He can't. He has money and lawyers and connections. He can do anything he wants. Isabella's face was anguished. I can't let that happen. I won't risk your daughter's future for this. So what are you saying? We just give up? I'm saying we need to be realistic about what we're facing. No. Daniel stepped closer. I've spent 3 years being realistic, being practical, doing what was necessary instead of what I wanted. And you know what? I was miserable. I was surviving, not living. For the first time since Emma's mother left, I feel alive again. Because of you. Daniel, I'm not asking you to choose between your family and me. I'm asking you to choose yourself. To decide what you want your life to look like and who you want to live it with. It's not that simple. It is that simple. Everything else is just noise. Isabella laughed bitterly. You're an idealist. Maybe, but you used to be one too, didn't you? Before the world taught you to play it safe? She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Yes, she whispered. I used to believe in impossible things. Then believe in this. Believe in us. If we do this, if we really do this, everything will change. Your life will become a circus. People will judge you, investigate you, try to tear you down. Let them try. Emma will be caught in the crossfire. Emma is stronger than you think, and she deserves to see her father fight for something he believes in. Isabella closed the distance between them. If I lose everything, my company, my family, my reputation, will you still want me? I don't want the CEO or the fortune or the last name. I want you. The woman who skips stones at ponds and admits she's lonely. The woman who helped my daughter because she could. The woman who's terrified to let anyone in but did it anyway. Tears spilled down Isabella's cheeks. This is crazy. Probably. We're going to regret this. Maybe. My father will destroy us. He can try. Isabella grabbed his jacket and pulled him into a kiss, desperate and fierce and full of everything they'd been holding back. Daniel wrapped his arms around her, and for that moment, the world fell away. There was no scandal, no pressure, no impossible odds, just two people who'd found each other against all logic and reason. When they finally broke apart, Isabella was smiling through her tears. Okay, she breathed. Okay, let's do this. Let's be crazy together. One day at a time? One day at a time. They stayed at the pond for another hour, making plans and acknowledging fears. They agreed to be discreet but not secretive. They'd face the consequences together, but they wouldn't hide like they'd done something wrong. My father will escalate, Isabella warned. He won't stop at bribery. Then we'll handle it when it comes. The board will use this against me. Then we'll prove them wrong. People will say terrible things about both of us. Let them talk. Isabella leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. How are you so calm about this? Because I've already survived the worst thing I could imagine. Losing Emma's mother, losing my career, thinking I might lose my daughter to illness. This is just noise. He kissed the top of her head. And the prize is worth the fight. The first signs of the coming storm appeared that very afternoon. Daniel was waiting in the parking lot during one of Isabella's meetings when his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Carter? This is Jennifer Walsh from City Chronicle. I'm writing a story about Isabella Vaughn, and I'd love to get your comment on your relationship with her. Daniel's stomach dropped. I have no comment. Sources say you've been spending significant personal time together, that you accompanied her on a beach trip instead of attending a scheduled business dinner. Care to confirm or deny? No comment. Mr. Carter, the story's running with or without your input. Wouldn't you prefer to give your side? I said no comment. Daniel hung up. His hands were shaking. It had begun. Less than 6 hours after they'd decided to stop hiding, the media was already circling. When Isabella emerged from her meeting, Daniel told her about the call. Her face went pale. They're moving faster than I expected. My father must have tipped them off. What do we do? Nothing. We don't confirm, don't deny, don't engage. Let them print whatever they want. We know the truth. But the article that appeared online that evening was worse than Daniel had imagined. The headline screamed, CEO's Secret Romance, Isabella Vaughn dating her driver. The The story painted Daniel as an opportunist and Isabella as a woman having a midlife crisis. It questioned Daniel's qualifications, mentioned Emma by name, and included a photo clearly taken without their knowledge. Daniel and Isabella at the beach, his hand in hers. Daniel's phone exploded with calls and texts, reporters, former colleagues asking if it was true, even Emma's school counselor, concerned about the attention Emma might face. Emma herself took it better than Daniel expected. "Dad, it's fine. So what if people know? You're allowed to date someone." "It's more complicated than that, kiddo. Isabella's my boss. People are going to say things about me, about her, maybe even about you." Emma shrugged with teenage nonchalance. "Let them. I know you're a good person. That's all that matters." But at Harrington Logistics, the reaction was far less understanding. The next morning, Daniel arrived to find the executive parking garage buzzing with whispers. Other drivers and staff stared at him as he walked to the Mercedes. Someone had left a note on the windshield. "Gold digger." Daniel crumpled it and threw it in the trash. Isabella was waiting when he picked her up, her expression grim. The board called an emergency meeting this afternoon. They want to discuss the situation. "What will you tell them?" "The truth, that my personal life is none of their business." "Isabella, maybe you should..." "Should what? Deny it? Apologize? Fire you to save face?" She met his eyes. "No, we agreed to face this together. I'm not backing down." The board meeting lasted 3 hours. Daniel waited in the parking garage, alternating between pacing and sitting in the car. Marcus found him around hour 2. "Rough week, huh?" "That's one way to put it." Marcus handed him a coffee. "The gossip's all over the executive circuit. Half the drivers think you're a genius for landing a billionaire. The other half think you're an idiot who's about to get chewed up and spit out. Which half are you?" "I think you're a good guy who fell for someone in a complicated situation, and I think she's lucky to have found someone who gives a damn about her as a person." Marcus paused. "But I also think you need to be prepared for this to get uglier before it gets better. These people don't fight fair." "I'm starting to realize that." When Isabella finally emerged, she looked exhausted but determined. She climbed into the back seat and said simply, "Drive." Daniel drove aimlessly, giving her space to decompress. Finally, she spoke. "The board gave me an ultimatum. End the relationship and publicly distance myself from you, or face a vote of no confidence." Daniel's heart sank. "When do they want your answer?" "By Friday, 3 days." Isabella leaned her head back. "They're using every argument: conflict of interest, damage to company reputation, questions about my judgment. One board member actually suggested I was going through early menopause and not thinking clearly." "That's disgusting. That's my life. Has been for years." She was quiet for a moment. "There's more. My father made some calls. He's been spreading rumors about you, suggesting you have a criminal record, that you're an unfit parent, that you've been embezzling from the company. None of that's true. I know that. But truth doesn't matter when you're fighting someone with unlimited resources and no conscience. He's trying to make you radioactive. If I choose you, I don't just lose my position. I lose my reputation, my credibility, everything I've built." Daniel pulled over into an empty lot and turned to face her. "Then maybe you shouldn't choose me." "What?" "I'm serious, Isabella. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. If stepping back means you keep your company..." "Stop." Isabella climbed out of the back seat and into the front passenger seat, facing him directly. "You don't get to make this decision for me. You don't get to be noble and self-sacrificing and decide what I can handle. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need a partner. Someone who trusts me to make my own choices even when they're hard." Her eyes blazed. "Yes, choosing you means choosing a harder path. But choosing them, choosing safety and reputation and everything I'm supposed to want, means choosing a life I can't stomach anymore. A life where I'm a puppet, dancing for other people's approval." "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She grabbed his hand. "Friday. I'm going to walk into that boardroom and tell them exactly where they can put their ultimatum. And then I'm going to resign." "Isabella, no." "Yes. I'm done playing their game by their rules. I'm going to start my own company. Build something that's actually mine, not my father's legacy or the board's investment. Something real." You'd give up everything? Your position, your salary, your security? I'd give up everything that's been suffocating me for 8 years, and I'd gain everything that actually matters. She smiled. Besides, I hear there's an excellent driver available. Someone reliable who shows up every single day. Think he'd be interested in joining a startup? Despite everything, Daniel laughed. He might be, if the CEO's someone he respects. What about someone he loves? The word hung between them. Love. They hadn't said it yet, hadn't dared to name what was happening, but there it was, naked and terrifying and true. Especially then, Daniel whispered. Isabella kissed him, and for a moment the future seemed bright instead of frightening. But the storm was only beginning. That night, Daniel's landlord called. Mr. Carter, I hate to do this, but I've been getting calls. Reporters, lawyers. They're asking questions about you, about Emma. I can't have that kind of attention on my property. Are you evicting us? Not yet, but I need you to resolve this situation quickly, or I'll have no choice. Daniel hung up and immediately called Emma's school. The principal confirmed his worst fear. Photographers had been spotted near the campus. For Emma's safety, she recommended he pick her up early. When Daniel arrived at the school, Emma was waiting with her backpack, her face flushed with anger. Some guy tried to take my picture, she said as soon as she got in the car. He asked if my dad was dating a rich lady. I told him to leave me alone. I'm so sorry, Em. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Don't apologize. This isn't your fault. It's those creepy people's fault for acting like stalkers. She buckled her seatbelt. But Dad, maybe we should talk to Ms. Vaughn. Make a plan or something, because this feels like it's going to get worse before it gets better. When did you get so smart? Excellent teacher, remember? That evening, Isabella came to their apartment for the first time. She'd insisted, despite Daniel's protests about the neighborhood and the modest space. When Emma opened the door, she stared for a moment before remembering her manners. Ms. Vaughn? Hi, come in. Isabella stepped into the small living room, taking in the second-hand furniture and Emma's marine biology posters. Thank you for letting me visit. They sat together, Daniel and Isabella on the couch, Emma in the armchair, and talked honestly about what was happening. Isabella explained the board's ultimatum, her decision to resign, and the likely fallout. It's going to get messy, she said directly to Emma. Reporters will probably keep bothering you. People might say cruel things about your dad, about me, about our relationship. I need you to know what you're signing up for. Emma considered this seriously. Then she said, Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you actually care about my dad? Or is this just some rebellion thing against your family? Emma, Daniel started. No, it's a fair question. Isabella turned to face Emma fully. I care about your father more than I've cared about anyone in a very long time. He makes me laugh. He challenges me to be honest. He sees me as a person, not a title or a bank account. And yes, part of why this matters so much is because it's my choice, not my family's. But the choice is him, specifically him. Does that make sense? Emma studied Isabella's face for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, I believe you. But if you hurt him, I'll be very disappointed in you. Isabella smiled. That's fair. And for what it's worth, if I hurt him, I'll be disappointed in myself too. Good. Emma stood. I'm going to do homework. You two can talk about adult stuff. After Emma left, Isabella leaned against Daniel. She's protective of you. She's all I have. Not anymore. Isabella laced her fingers through his. Now you have me too, for better or worse. Worse might be coming soon. Then we'll face it together. Friday arrived with the weight of Judgment Day. Daniel drove Isabella to the Harrington Logistics building one last time, both of them silent with anticipation. In the parking garage, Isabella turned to him. Whatever happens in there, don't second-guess us. Promise me. I promise. I'll text you when it's done. She walked into the building with her head high, and Daniel waited in the Mercedes, his heart pounding. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, his phone buzzed. It's done. Come to the executive entrance. Daniel pulled the car around and found Isabella standing on the sidewalk, a cardboard box in her arms. Her face was streaked with tears, but she was smiling. I'm unemployed, she announced as he opened her door. How does it feel? Terrifying. Liberating. Right. She set the box on the seat beside her. Drive me home, Daniel. Our real lives start now. As they pulled away from Harrington Logistics for the last time, neither of them looked back. The hardest part was over, or so they thought. But Richard Vaughn wasn't finished, not by a long shot, and the real battle was just beginning. The reality of Isabella's decision hit them both within hours. Daniel had barely pulled into Isabella's driveway when her phone started ringing. She glanced at the screen and her jaw tightened. My mother, third call in 10 minutes. She declined it. She's probably already heard. Do you want to go inside and deal with it? No, I want to go somewhere they can't find me. Isabella looked at him. Can we go to your apartment? I know it's small, but it's yours whenever you need it. They drove across town as Isabella's phone continued to buzz with ignored calls. By the time they reached Daniel's building, she'd received 43 messages and 17 missed calls. Emma was already home from school, sprawled on the couch with her laptop. She looked up when they entered, immediately reading the tension in the room. Bad day? You could say that. Isabella sank into the armchair, suddenly looking exhausted. I just quit my job, abandoned my family's company, and probably destroyed my relationship with my parents forever. So yeah, bad day. Emma closed her laptop. But you did what you wanted to do, right? Not what they wanted? Yes. Then it was a good day. The rest is just noise. Emma stood and headed toward her room. I'll give you guys space, but Dad, there's leftover pasta in the fridge if Ms. Vaughn's hungry. People make better decisions on a full stomach. After Emma left, Daniel sat beside Isabella and took her hand. Talk to me. The board was brutal. They called me irresponsible, accused me of jeopardizing everything my father built, suggested I was having some kind of breakdown. Her voice was steady, but Daniel heard the hurt underneath. I let them talk, and when they were finished, I told them I was done being their puppet, done sacrificing my life for their profit margins. And then I resigned effective immediately. How did they react? Shocked, mostly. They didn't think I'd actually do it. They thought I'd cave like I always have before. Isabella's smile was bitter. My father's already called 3 times. He's threatening to cut me off completely. No inheritance, no trust fund, no family connections. He wants to make sure I understand the consequences. Do you? I understand I'm about to find out what it's like to be you. No safety net, no generational wealth to fall back on. Just me and whatever I can build with my own hands. That's terrifying. It is. Isabella met his eyes. But also, it's the freest I've felt in my entire adult life. Over reheated pasta and cheap wine, they made plans. Isabella had savings, substantial savings that her father couldn't touch, enough to live on for a year, maybe 2 if she was careful, enough to start a company if she was smart about it. I've been thinking about this for years, she admitted. A logistics company that focuses on small businesses, the clients that bigger companies ignore because they're not profitable enough. Fair wages, sustainable practices, actual humanity in the business model. Sounds ambitious. Sounds impossible, you mean. But I know this industry inside and out. I know the gaps, the inefficiencies, the places where a smaller, smarter company could compete. Her eyes lit up with the kind of passion Daniel had rarely seen from her. I can make this work. I know I can. Then let's do it. Isabella blinked. You said you needed a reliable driver. I'm available. Daniel, I can't pay you what Harrington did. Not at first. Maybe not for a long time. I don't need what Harrington paid. I need to work with someone who treats me like a human being, someone who's building something that matters. He refilled her wine glass. Besides, someone once told me that being successful and being happy aren't mutually exclusive. I'd like to find out if she was right. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. You really want to do this? Start from nothing? No guarantee of success? I've started from nothing before. At least this time I won't be alone. They talked until past midnight, sketching plans on notebook paper while Emma slept in her room. Company structure, target clients, competitive advantages. Isabella's business mind was extraordinary. She saw angles and opportunities Daniel would never have considered. But she also listened to his ideas about worker dignity and sustainable scheduling with genuine interest. You're right, she said after he suggested profit sharing with employees. The big companies treat workers as expendable. We could build loyalty by actually valuing people. Revolutionary concept. Shouldn't be revolutionary. Should be basic human decency. Welcome to capitalism. But she was smiling as she wrote it down. By 1 a.m., they had the skeleton of a business plan. By 2, they'd named the company Meridian Logistics. A fresh start. A new direction. I should go home, Isabella said, gathering her notes. Let you sleep. Stay. The word was out before Daniel could second-guess it. The couch pulls out. You shouldn't be alone tonight. Isabella looked at him for a long moment. Are you sure? Emma's here, and people are already talking. I'm sure. And Emma won't care. She's got better sense than most adults. He made up the pull-out couch, while Isabella borrowed a t-shirt to sleep in. When he emerged from his room to say goodnight, he found her standing at Emma's door looking at the marine biology posters. She really loves the ocean, Isabella said softly. More than anything, it's her escape, her dream. We should make sure she gets there, to college, to research, to whatever she wants to do. Isabella turned to face him. When Meridian starts making money, and it will, I want to set up a college fund for her, a real one. Isabella, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. She's important to you, which makes her important to me. She paused. And honestly, she's the first teenager I've met who doesn't treat me like an ATM or a business opportunity. I'd like to help her future if I can. Daniel pulled her into a hug, overwhelmed by gratitude and affection and the growing certainty that this woman was becoming essential to his life. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. Thank you for letting me be part of this. Your family. Your life. She pulled back and smiled tiredly. Now go to bed. We have a company to build tomorrow. The next morning, Daniel woke to find Isabella already awake, sitting at his kitchen table with her laptop and a cup of coffee. Emma was there too, surprisingly, eating cereal and asking questions. So you're really starting from scratch? Emma asked. Completely. No family money, no connections, just whatever I can make happen through work and strategy. That's kind of cool, actually, like a superhero origin story, but for business. Isabella laughed. I've never thought of it that way, but sure. Billionaire loses everything, has to rebuild from nothing. Very comic book. Except you're not really losing everything, Emma pointed out. You're choosing to walk away. That's different. That's brave. Over the next week, the reality of their situation became increasingly clear. Isabella's father made good on his threats. Her trust fund was frozen. Her name was removed from family accounts. The car she drove, a Tesla she'd thought was hers, was repossessed from her driveway. Her parents' lawyer sent a cease and desist letter forbidding her from using the Vaughn name in any business capacity. They're trying to erase me, Isabella said, staring at the letter. She was staying with Daniel now, the pull-out couch having become her permanent sleeping arrangement. Her mansion in Thornhill Estates had been owned by the family trust, not her personally. They'd given her 2 weeks to remove her belongings. They can't erase you, Daniel said. They can take away things, but they can't take away what you know, what you've built inside yourself. I keep telling myself that, but it's harder than I expected. She looked around Daniel's small apartment, so different from her glass palace. I've never been poor before, never had to worry about money, and now I'm looking at my savings and calculating how long they'll last and realizing that for the first time in my life, I don't have a safety net. Welcome to how the rest of us live. How do you stand it? The constant worry. You learn to focus on what you can control, and you remember why you're doing it. Daniel pulled her close. You're doing this for freedom, for the chance to build something real. That's worth the fear. But the fear was real and getting worse. Isabella's former colleagues stopped returning her calls. Business contacts who'd been friendly suddenly claimed to be too busy. The industry she'd dominated for 8 years had turned its back on her completely. Your father's blackballing you, Marcus told Daniel when they met for coffee. Word's out that anyone who works with Isabella Vaughn will lose access to Richard Vaughn's network, and his network is half the industry. Can he do that? He's doing it. I'm sorry, kid. This is uglier than I thought it would get. The breaking point came 2 weeks after Isabella's resignation. Daniel came home from a failed job interview, Another company that had seemed interested until they learned about his connection to Isabella, to find her sitting on the floor of his apartment, surrounded by rejection letters. 17 clients, she said without looking up. 17 small businesses I approached about using Meridian Logistics. Every single one said no. Some were polite about it. Others told me directly that they couldn't risk angering the Vaughn family. Daniel sat beside her. We'll find others. Will we? Because it's starting to feel like my father's reach extends everywhere. Like, no matter what we do, we can't escape his shadow. So we go smaller, find businesses he doesn't control. And how do we reach them? I've been cut off from every industry publication, every trade show, every networking event. We're shouting into a void. Daniel had no answer for that. He just held her while she cried tears of frustration and fear. Emma found them like that when she came home from school. She stood in the doorway for a moment, then disappeared into her room. She emerged 5 minutes later with her laptop. I have an idea, she announced. You can't use traditional business channels because Ms. Vaughn's dad controls them, but he doesn't control the internet. Isabella wiped her eyes. What do you mean? Social media, YouTube, online communities? There are thousands of small business owners out there who hate big logistics companies because they're too expensive or too complicated. What if you reach them directly? I don't know anything about social media marketing, but I do. Every kid my age does. We live on these platforms. Emma opened her laptop. Let me show you something. For the next hour, Emma walked them through her idea. A YouTube channel explaining logistics in simple terms. A TikTok account showing behind the scenes of starting a company from nothing. Instagram posts highlighting small businesses that deserved better shipping options. It's called grassroots marketing, Emma explained. You can't compete with the big companies in their world, so you build your own world, one that's authentic and real and shows people why they should care. Isabella stared at the screen, something shifting in her expression. This could actually work. It's how all the best companies are growing now. Direct to consumer, authentic content, real relationships instead of corporate BS. Emma grinned. Sorry, corporate nonsense. No, BS was right the first time. Isabella looked at Daniel. What do you think? I think our daughter is a genius. The word slipped out before Daniel could stop it. Our daughter. Emma blushed and Isabella's eyes went wide, but neither of them corrected him. Well, Isabella said softly, our genius daughter might have just saved our company. They threw themselves into the new strategy. Emma helped Isabella set up social media accounts while Daniel used his savings to rent a tiny office space in a rundown building on the east side. It was barely bigger than a storage unit, with water-stained ceiling tiles and a temperamental heater, but it was theirs. Isabella filmed her first video on her phone, standing in the empty office. Hi, I'm Isabella. 2 weeks ago, I was the CEO of a major logistics company. Today, I'm standing in a room that smells like mildew, trying to build something better. Here's why that matters. She posted it without any editing, raw and honest. Within 3 days, it had 50,000 views. Within a week, 200,000. The comments were mixed. Some people praised her courage. Others called her naive or accused her of faking poverty for attention. But people were watching. And some of them were small business owners desperate for alternatives to the companies that had been gouging them for years. The first real client came from a comment on Emma's TikTok. A woman who owned a small organic soap company in Portland, frustrated with shipping costs that ate into her slim profit margins. Isabella offered her a rate 30% below the industry standard. We can't afford to go that low, Daniel warned. We can't afford not to. We need success stories. We need proof that this model works. Isabella was already drafting a contract. If we make this work for her, she'll tell others. That's how we build momentum. The soap company job was tiny, a dozen packages a week, but Isabella and Daniel handled it themselves. They drove to warehouses, negotiated shipping rates, personally ensured every package arrived on time. It was grueling work for minimal pay, but the client was thrilled. She posted about it online, tagged Meridian Logistics, shared her savings breakdown. 3 more clients reached out the next day, then 7, then 20. Within a month, they had 65 small businesses using their services. The profit margins were razor thin, but they were actually making money. More importantly, They were building something real. Daniel and Isabella worked 18-hour days. They moved 2 desks into the tiny office and a coffee maker that barely worked. Emma came by after school to help with social media and customer service emails. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. "I haven't been this tired since my first year as CEO," Isabella said one night, her head on Daniel's shoulder as they reviewed the week's numbers. "But I also haven't been this happy." "No regrets?" "Not a single one." She lifted her head to look at him. "I gave up a fortune and a title. But I gained you, Emma, and the freedom to build something I actually believe in. That's not a trade. That's a miracle." But Richard Vaughn wasn't done fighting. The lawsuit arrived on a Tuesday morning. Daniel signed for the certified letter and felt his stomach drop as he read the contents. Richard Vaughn was suing Isabella for breach of non-compete agreements, theft of trade secrets, and tortious interference with business relationships. He was seeking $10 million in damages and a permanent injunction preventing her from operating in the logistics industry. "He's trying to destroy us legally," Isabella said, reading the papers with shaking hands. "If he wins this, Meridian is finished before it even starts." "Can he win?" "I don't know. I never signed a non-compete. I was an owner, not an employee, but he has expensive lawyers who'll find creative arguments." She set the papers down. "We need legal help, good legal help, which we absolutely cannot afford." The lawyer they consulted confirmed Isabella's fears. Defending against the lawsuit would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, money they didn't have. Without a defense, Richard would win by default. "I'm so sorry," the lawyer said, "but unless you can afford representation, I'd recommend settling. Maybe he'd agree to let you work in a different industry if you agree to stay out of logistics." "No." Isabella's voice was steel. "He doesn't get to dictate my life anymore. I'll defend this suit if I have to represent myself. That would be legal suicide. Then I'll die fighting, but I won't surrender." They left the lawyer's office in silence. Daniel drove aimlessly while Isabella stared out the window. "I can't ask you to keep fighting this," she said finally. "This lawsuit could drag on for years. Even if we win, it'll drain every resource we have. You should cut ties with Meridian before it drags you down too." "Not a chance. Daniel, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. We're in this together. That's what partnerships mean." "This partnership is costing you everything. Your savings, your time, your security, and giving me everything that actually matters. Purpose, hope, you." He pulled over and turned to face her. "I've been surviving for 3 years, working jobs I hated, just getting by, telling myself that was enough. But it wasn't enough. Not even close. For the first time since Emma's mother left, I'm actually building something, fighting for something. That's worth every risk." Isabella grabbed his face and kissed him hard. "How are you so sure about this?" "Because I've already lost everything once. I know what that feels like. And I know that even if we lose Meridian, even if your father wins, we'll still have each other. That's more than I had before." They sat in the parked car, holding each other, drawing strength from proximity. "Okay," Isabella whispered. "Okay. We fight. Together." The legal battle consumed the next 3 months. They couldn't afford lawyers, so Isabella represented Meridian herself, studying contract law late into the night and filing motions that were probably full of technical errors but came from a place of absolute conviction. The business continued to grow despite the lawsuit hanging over them. Word of mouth brought new clients. Their authentic social media presence attracted followers who became customers. Slowly, painfully, Meridian was becoming viable, but the stress was crushing. Daniel watched Isabella lose weight, watched exhaustion etch lines around her eyes. She smiled less, slept less, worked constantly with a kind of desperate energy that worried him. "You need to rest," he told her one night, finding her still at her desk at 2 a.m. "I'll rest when this is over." Isabella "He's not taking this from me, Daniel. My father spent my whole life controlling me, molding me, using me as a chess piece in his business games. Meridian is the first thing that's ever been truly mine. I won't let him have it. It's not worth your health. It's worth everything." Her voice broke. "Don't you understand? If I lose this, if he wins, then he was right all along. I was just his puppet, incapable of succeeding without the family name. I have to prove him wrong. I have to. Daniel pulled her away from the desk and into his arms. You've already proven him wrong. Every client we have, every successful delivery, every small business we've helped, that's proof. You don't need a judge's ruling to validate what you've built. She cried against his chest, months of stress finally breaking through her armor. Daniel held her and let her fall apart, knowing she needed this release. Emma appeared in the doorway, her hair messy from sleep. She took one look at Isabella and climbed onto the couch beside them, wrapping her arms around both of them. We're going to be okay, Emma said, with the absolute certainty of 15-year-old conviction. All of us. We're a family now. Families survive. That word again. Family. The three of them, bound together by choice rather than blood. The preliminary hearing happened on a gray November morning. Isabella wore a suit she'd bought at a discount store. Nothing like the designer clothes from her former life, but professional enough. Daniel sat in the courtroom gallery beside Emma, who'd insisted on skipping school to be there. Richard Vaughn arrived with 3 lawyers and an entourage. He didn't even glance at his daughter. The hearing was technical and brief. Isabella presented her arguments. That she'd never signed a non-compete, that she wasn't using any proprietary information, that her father's lawsuit was personal vendetta masquerading as business protection. Richard's lawyers were smooth and practiced. They painted Isabella as an ungrateful daughter stealing her father's clients and legacy. The judge listened to both sides, asked sharp questions, and then made a ruling that surprised everyone. I'm not dismissing this case, she said, but I'm also not granting the preliminary injunction. Ms. Vaughn may continue operating Meridian Logistics while this matter proceeds to trial. We'll reconvene in 4 months. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. It was time. Outside the courtroom, Isabella sagged against Daniel in relief. 4 months. We have 4 months to prove Meridian is legitimate before this goes to trial. Then we make them count. Richard Vaughn appeared on the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters who'd caught wind of the family drama. He gave a statement painting Isabella as misguided and himself as a concerned father trying to protect his life's work. Isabella stood apart, refusing to engage, but as Richard was leaving, he finally looked at her. For just a moment, Daniel saw something flicker across the older man's face. Not anger, not victory, but something almost like regret. Then it was gone, and Richard climbed into his Cadillac and disappeared. He looked old, Isabella said quietly. Tired. I've never seen him look tired before. Maybe all this is costing him too. Good. Let it cost him everything. Let him know what it feels like. But there was no satisfaction in her voice, only sadness. They drove back to the office, their tiny, dingy office that smelled like mildew and ambition, and got back to work. There were packages to ship, clients to serve, a business to build. And for the first time in months, Isabella smiled as she worked. The judge had given them time. Now they just had to make it count. 4 months to prove they could survive. 4 months to show that love and determination could outweigh money and power. 4 months to build a life that was truly theirs. The clock was ticking, but they were fighting together, and that made all the difference. The 4 months passed in a blur of relentless work and small victories. Daniel would remember them later as the hardest and most alive he'd ever felt. Days that started before dawn and ended well past midnight, filled with deliveries and negotiations and the constant race against time. Meridian Logistics grew despite everything working against it. By the end of January, they had 243 clients. By February, 418. The tiny office became too small, so they rented a slightly larger space in the same building, still run down, still smelling faintly of mildew, but with room for 3 desks instead of 2. Emma had become their unofficial social media manager, posting content during lunch breaks and after homework. Her authentic, funny videos showing the reality of a startup, the broken coffee maker, the leaking ceiling, Isabella and Daniel celebrating when they landed a big client, resonated with thousands of people who were tired of corporate polish and wanted something real. You guys are kind of famous, Emma announced one evening in March, showing them her phone. This video of Dad doing a happy dance after the Portland account renewed has 2 million views. Daniel groaned. Please tell me you're joking. Nope, you're a meme now. Single dad celebrates small business success. People love it. Isabella laughed, really laughed for the first time in weeks. We should use this. Film more behind the scenes content. Show people that business success doesn't have to mean selling your soul. I'm not becoming a TikTok star, Daniel protested. Too late, Dad. You already are. The trial date loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. April 15th, less than 6 weeks away. Isabella spent every spare moment preparing her defense, reading case law, drafting arguments. She'd lost more weight, and the shadows under her eyes had become permanent fixtures. You need to sleep, Daniel told her one night, finding her at her desk at 3 a.m., surrounded by legal documents. I will, after I finish this brief. Isabella, don't. Her voice was sharp with exhaustion. Please don't tell me to rest or take care of myself or any of the things I know I should be doing. I can't afford to. Not with 6 weeks left. Daniel sat beside her and gently took the pen from her hand. You know what your father wants. He wants you to burn out, to exhaust yourself so completely that you can't fight anymore. Every night you don't sleep, every meal you skip, every moment you push yourself past breaking, that's a victory for him. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept that I might lose? No. Accept that you've already won the parts that matter. We have a business that's growing, clients who love us, a life we chose instead of one that was chosen for us. He turned her chair to face him. The trial will determine legal outcomes, but it can't determine whether we succeeded or failed. We've already succeeded. Look around you. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. I'm so tired, Daniel. I'm tired of fighting, tired of proving myself, tired of everything. Then let me carry some of it. You don't have to do this alone. She collapsed against him, and he held her while she cried out months of stress and fear and exhaustion. When she finally quieted, she whispered, What did I do to deserve you? You asked a stranger for $3 in a coffee shop, and then you gave him $5. She laughed through her tears. Best investment I ever made. They worked together on the legal preparation after that, Daniel helping her organize documents and practice arguments even though he barely understood the terminology. Emma helped too, researching case precedents online and making encouraging posters to hang in the office. Trial prep team Carter Vaughn, she'd written on one, kicking legal butt since 2024. We're not married, Isabella pointed out, but she was smiling. Not yet, Emma said casually, then disappeared before either adult could respond. Daniel and Isabella looked at each other, the word hanging between them. Yet. Is that something you'd want? Isabella asked carefully. Eventually, I mean, marriage. Are you asking me or asking in general? Both, neither. I don't know. She was blushing now, looking younger and more vulnerable than her usual CEO confidence. I've been thinking about the future, after the trial, whatever the outcome. And I realized I can't imagine that future without you in it. I can't imagine mine without you either, Daniel said honestly. You and Emma. You've both become essential to me. So maybe someday when things are less chaotic and we're not fighting my father in court and we actually have time to breathe, I would marry you in a heartbeat, Daniel interrupted. Chaos and all. Court battles and all. I'd marry you tomorrow if you wanted. Isabella's smile was radiant. Ask me again after the trial, when we know what our future actually looks like. Deal. They kissed, and for a moment the stress and uncertainty faded into background noise. March bled into April. The trial date approached with inexorable certainty. Meridian continued to grow. They hit 600 clients in the first week of April, and Emma's social media following had reached 500,000 across platforms. People are invested in your story, Marcus told Daniel over coffee 3 days before the trial. The older driver had become a regular presence in their lives, offering advice and occasional help with deliveries. They're rooting for you, for both of you. David versus Goliath, you know? Except in the actual Bible story, David had divine intervention. We just have determination and a really good social media manager. Marcus laughed. Sometimes that's enough. You've built something remarkable, Daniel. Win or lose this trial, you should be proud. I am proud. Of Isabella especially. She walked away from everything for a chance at something real. And for you. And for me, Daniel agreed quietly. The night before the trial, neither Daniel nor Isabella could sleep. They sat in the office with Emma, eating takeout Chinese food and trying not to think about tomorrow. "I have something to say," Emma announced suddenly, "and I need you both to listen without interrupting." Daniel and Isabella exchanged concerned glances but nodded. "When Mom left, I was too young to understand. But as I got older, I realized what Dad sacrificed for me. Every opportunity he didn't take, every dream he postponed, every hard choice he made, it was all for me. And that's a lot of pressure for a kid, knowing your parent gave up everything because of you." "Emma, I never wanted you to feel," Daniel started. "You promised not to interrupt. So hush." Emma took a breath. "What I'm trying to say is that for the first time since Mom left, I don't feel like Dad's only reason for existing. He has you now, Isabella. He has this business. He has a life beyond just being my father. And that's made him happier than I've seen him in years. So whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that you didn't just change his life. You gave him back parts of himself that I didn't even know were missing." Isabella was crying openly now. "Emma, that's the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm not finished. You've changed my life too. You believed in Dad when no one else did. You gave him a chance. You gave us both a chance. And you've shown me what it looks like when someone chooses love and integrity over money and power. That matters. That's worth fighting for." Emma stood up. "So tomorrow, when you walk into that courtroom, remember that you're not just fighting for a company. You're fighting for all of us, for this family we've built. And we believe in you." The courtroom was packed on April 15th. News of the trial had spread through industry circles and social media alike. Reporters filled the gallery alongside Meridian clients who'd taken time off work to show support. Someone had made signs, Team Meridian, and Small Business Matters, though the bailiff made them put them away. Richard Vaughn arrived with his legal team, looking every inch the powerful CEO. But Daniel noticed the man's hands shook slightly as he organized his documents. Isabella noticed too. She stared at her father across the courtroom, and for a moment their eyes met. Richard looked away first. The trial itself was technical and grueling. Richard's lawyers presented their case with polished precision, arguing that Isabella had violated implied non-compete agreements, used proprietary knowledge, and deliberately poached clients. Isabella defended herself with equal passion, if less polish. She argued that she'd built Meridian using publicly available information and her own expertise, that her clients had chosen her service independently, that her father's lawsuit was retaliation for her personal choices, not legitimate business protection. The testimony lasted 3 days. Client after client took the stand explaining why they'd chosen Meridian: better rates, more personal service, a business model that actually cared about small operators. Several became emotional, describing how Meridian had saved their businesses when larger companies had failed them. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. The judge called a brief recess, and when they reconvened, she made an announcement. "I've reviewed the evidence and testimony. Before I issue my ruling, I'd like to hear directly from both parties. Mr. Vaughn, why did you bring this lawsuit?" Richard stood, clearly surprised by the question. "To protect my company's interests, Your Honor. My daughter, not the legal arguments, the real reason." Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, less commanding, more human. "Because she was supposed to marry someone I approved of, someone who would strengthen our family position. She was supposed to take over my company and continue what I built. She was supposed to—" He trailed off. "She was supposed to obey you," the judge said quietly. "Yes." Richard looked at Isabella. "I spent 30 years building Vaughn Logistics. I sacrificed everything, time with my family, personal happiness, health, to make it succeed, and I wanted my daughter to inherit that legacy, to appreciate what I'd built, to understand that success requires sacrifice." "Did you ever ask what she wanted?" the judge asked. "What she wanted wasn't relevant. I knew what was best for the company, for the family." "And when she disagreed?" "Then she was being selfish, ungrateful, throwing away everything I'd given her." Richard's voice cracked. "But standing here now, watching her defend herself, seeing what she's built from nothing, I realize I was the one being selfish. I wanted her to validate my choices by making the same ones. I wanted her life to justify mine." The courtroom was utterly silent. "Ms. Vaughn," the judge said, "do you have a response?" Isabella stood slowly. I spent my whole life trying to earn your approval, Father, trying to be the daughter you wanted instead of the person I was. And it was never enough. No matter what I achieved, how hard I worked, how much I sacrificed, it was never enough because you didn't want a daughter. You wanted a successor, a duplicate, someone to carry on exactly as you had. Isabella, I'm not finished. For the first time in my life, I'm building something that's mine. Not yours, not the board's, mine. And it's messy and difficult and uncertain, but it's also real. It's authentic. It matters. She gestured to the gallery. These people, my clients, my friends, my family, they don't care about my last name or my trust fund or who I'm supposed to marry. They care about whether I show up and do the work. That's the validation I was looking for all along. Not your approval, self-respect. Richard's face crumpled. For the first time Daniel could remember, the man looked genuinely vulnerable. I'm sorry, he whispered. Isabella, I'm so sorry. You were right. About everything. I turned you into a chess piece when I should have loved you as a daughter. You did love me, just not in a way I could feel. Isabella's voice was gentle now. And I understand that you did what you thought was right, but I'm doing what I know is right, for me, for the life I want to live. The judge cleared her throat. Thank you both. That was illuminating. I'm ready to issue my ruling. Everyone held their breath. This case, the judge began, is clearly not about non-compete violations or trade secrets. It's about a father trying to control his adult daughter's life, using the legal system as a weapon. Ms. Vaughn violated no agreements because she signed none. She used no proprietary information because the logistics industry operates on publicly available knowledge and personal expertise. And she poached no clients. They chose her service independently based on merit. Richard closed his eyes. Therefore, I'm ruling in favor of the defendant. The lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Vaughn, you will pay Ms. Vaughn's legal fees and court costs, and I strongly suggest you use this as an opportunity to repair your relationship with your daughter before it's too late. The courtroom erupted. Meridian clients cheered. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Emma jumped up and screamed, then immediately sat back down when the bailiff glared at her. Isabella stood frozen, as if unable to process what had just happened. Then she turned to Daniel, her face transforming with relief and joy and disbelief. We won, she whispered. We actually won. Daniel pulled her into his arms right there in the courtroom, not caring who saw or what they thought. You won. You did this. We did this, all of us. Outside the courthouse, they were mobbed by supporters and reporters. Isabella gave a brief statement thanking the judge, her clients, and her team. She didn't mention her father. But as they were leaving, Richard approached them. He looked older than he had at the trial's beginning, diminished somehow. Isabella, could we talk just for a minute? Isabella glanced at Daniel, who nodded and stepped away to give them privacy. Father and daughter stood facing each other on the courthouse steps, years of hurt and disappointment between them. I meant what I said in there, Richard began. I'm sorry for trying to control you, for the lawsuit, for not seeing who you really were because I was so focused on who I wanted you to be. Thank you for saying that. I don't expect forgiveness. I know I've destroyed too much for that, but I want you to know that watching you in there, seeing your passion, your conviction, the business you've built, I was proud, genuinely proud, maybe for the first time. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. That's all I ever wanted, for you to be proud of me, not my achievements or my position, just me. I know, and I wasted years not giving you that. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is a check. $2 million. Not as a bribe or an apology, as an investment in Meridian Logistics. Because I believe in what you're building, and because I'd like a chance to support you the way I should have been supporting you all along. Isabella stared at the envelope. I can't accept this. Why not? Because I need to prove I can succeed without the Vaughn money. That's the whole point. No, the point was proving you could succeed on your own terms. You've done that. You won this case. You built a thriving business from nothing. You don't have anything left to prove. Richard pressed the envelope into her hands. Let me help. Not as a controlling father, but as an investor who believes in your vision. You can accept it or not, but know that it comes with no strings, no demands. Just a father's hope that maybe someday his daughter might forgive him. Isabella looked at the envelope, then at her father. I don't forgive you yet. You hurt me too deeply for too long, but maybe if you're willing to actually try to know me instead of mold me, we could start rebuilding, slowly. I'd like that, Richard said quietly. Very much. They didn't hug. The wounds were too fresh for that, but they nodded at each other, a beginning, however tentative. That night, the entire Meridian team, all three of them, celebrated at the same cheap Chinese restaurant where they'd eaten the night before the trial. Emma ordered enough food for 6 people. Daniel splurged on expensive wine. Isabella laughed until she cried, releasing months of tension. So what do we do with $2 million, Daniel asked, besides hire actual employees? Expand the fleet, get a real office that doesn't smell like mildew, set up that college fund for Emma we talked about. Isabella took a sip of wine. Build something sustainable, something that lasts. Speaking of things that last, Emma said with studied casualness, are you two going to get married or what? Because the suspense is killing me. Daniel nearly choked on his wine. Isabella laughed so hard she had to put down her glass. You know what? Isabella said when she caught her breath. Yes, I think we are. She turned to Daniel. Unless you've changed your mind. Not even slightly. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. Isabella Vaughn, will you marry me? Even though I have nothing to offer except terrible dance moves, a daughter with strong opinions, and a commitment to showing up every single day? Those are literally the only things I want, Isabella said. So yes, absolutely yes. Emma cheered so loudly the other diners turned to stare. Can I be the maid of honor? And can we not have a fancy wedding because those are boring? And can we... One thing at a time, kiddo, Daniel laughed. We just got engaged 5 seconds ago. I'm excited. This is exciting, Emma grinned. Also, I told you guys months ago this was happening. No one ever listens to me. The wedding happened 3 months later in Pine Grove Park, at the same pond where Daniel and Isabella had skipped stones and shared their first honest conversation. It was small, just close friends, a handful of Meridian clients, Marcus in his best suit, and Emma as maid of honor wearing a dress she'd picked out herself. Richard Vaughn attended, sitting quietly in the back row. Isabella had invited him tentatively, and he'd accepted with gratitude. They were learning to talk to each other, slowly dismantling years of dysfunction. It would take time, maybe years, but they were trying. Daniel's hand shook as he slid the simple gold band onto Isabella's finger. She'd insisted they buy inexpensive rings. We have a business to grow, not jewelry to collect, she'd said. But when she looked at the ring on her hand, her smile was worth more than any diamond. You may kiss your bride, the officiant said, and Daniel pulled Isabella close and kissed her while their friends cheered and Emma wiped away happy tears. At the reception in a rented community center, Isabella gave a toast. A year ago, I had everything society told me I should want: money, power, status, success. I also had crushing loneliness, constant pressure, and a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. She looked at Daniel. Then I met a man in a coffee shop who asked me for $3, and I gave him $5. Best investment I ever made. Everyone laughed. Daniel taught me that being vulnerable isn't weakness, that asking for help is courage, that love and respect matter more than profit margins. And together we built something I'm actually proud of. Not because it's big or successful or impressive to others, but because it's ours. It's real. It reflects who we are and what we value. She raised her glass. To new beginnings, to chosen family, to the courage to walk away from what's expected and toward what's real, and to love that shows up every single day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. To love, everyone echoed. Daniel and Isabella danced their first dance to a song Emma had picked, something about brave hearts and new starts. They weren't good dancers. They stepped on each other's feet and laughed about it, but they were happy. Marcus approached Daniel later in the evening. You did good, kid, both of you. Thank you for everything, the advice, the support, the friendship. That's what people do when they see something worth fighting for. They show up. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. You've got a good life ahead of you. Appreciate every minute. Meridian Logistics continued to grow. Within a year of the trial, they had 15 employees and 1,200 clients. They moved into a proper office building. Nothing fancy, but clean and professional. They expanded into 3 states, always maintaining their commitment to small businesses and fair wages. Emma graduated high school with honors and a full scholarship to a marine biology program at UC San Diego. At her graduation party, she gave a speech thanking her father and Isabella for showing her that courage means choosing your own path even when it's difficult. Dad could have stayed at a big company, kept his head down, played it safe. Isabella could have married someone her father approved of and lived a comfortable, empty life. But they chose risk. They chose authenticity. They chose each other. And that taught me that the safe path isn't always the right path. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to build the life you actually want. 2 years after their wedding, Isabella and Daniel stood in their Meridian office, now located in a renovated warehouse with actual natural light, and looked at the growth charts on the wall. 3,000 clients, 42 employees, profit margins that allowed them to pay living wages and still expand. "We did it," Isabella said, leaning against Daniel. "We actually built something sustainable." "You sound surprised." "I am a little. There were so many moments when I thought we'd fail, when the obstacles seemed insurmountable. But we kept showing up." "We kept showing up," she agreed. Emma appeared in the doorway, home from college for the summer. "Hey, you two, there's someone here to see you." Richard Vaughn walked in, looking hesitant. He and Isabella had rebuilt their relationship slowly over the past 2 years. Monthly lunches, careful conversations, gradual trust. They'd never be close the way some fathers and daughters were. Too much damage had been done, but they'd found a tentative peace. "I wanted to tell you in person," Richard said. "I'm retiring from Vaughn Logistics. The board voted last week, and I recommended they reach out to Meridian about a potential partnership." Isabella stared at him. "What?" "Not a merger, not absorption, a partnership between equals. You've proven your model works. We've seen our client satisfaction drop while yours has soared. We could learn from each other." Richard smiled. "If you're interested." "Why are you doing this?" "Because I finally understand what you were trying to tell me all along. Success isn't about size or power or market domination. It's about building something you believe in, something sustainable, something human." He looked around the office. "You've built that, and I'm proud of you, genuinely, completely proud." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "So, will you consider the partnership?" Isabella looked at Daniel, who smiled and nodded. She looked at Emma, who gave a thumbs up. Then she turned back to her father. "On one condition. You come to family dinners, every other Sunday. No business talk, just family." Richard's face transformed with joy and relief. "I would love that." Later that evening, Daniel drove along a quiet coastal road with Isabella in the passenger seat and Emma in the back. They were heading to the beach, the same one where Isabella and Daniel had spent their first day playing hooky together. It had become a family tradition, a place to reconnect when work got too consuming. Emma was absorbed in a textbook about coral reef ecosystems, occasionally sharing fascinating facts neither adult understood. Isabella held Daniel's hand across the center console, her wedding ring catching the late afternoon light. "You know what I was thinking about?" Isabella said. "What's that?" "That morning in the coffee shop, when you asked me for $3. If I'd said no and walked away, my entire life would be different. Probably better from a financial standpoint." Not even close to better. Richer maybe, but emptier, lonelier, less real." She squeezed his hand. "I had $300 million, and I was miserable. Now I have a fraction of that, and I'm happier than I've ever been. Money can't buy what we have." "What do we have?" Isabella thought about it. "Purpose, partnership, a family we chose, work that matters, love that shows up, a life we built together instead of one that was handed to us or forced on us." Sounds pretty good when you list it like that. It's better than good. It's everything. They arrived at the beach as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Emma ran ahead to the water, her shoes already off, shouting something about tide pools. Daniel and Isabella walked slowly behind her, their fingers intertwined. "Do you ever regret it?" Daniel asked. "Giving up your old life?" "Not for a single second. Do you ever regret asking a stranger for coffee money? Not even slightly. They stood at the water's edge, watching Emma explore the rocks with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found their calling. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, full of possibility. I love you, Isabella said, for asking for help when you needed it, for believing in impossible things, for showing up every single day, even when it's hard, for being you. I love you too, for listening in a coffee shop, for taking a chance on an unemployed driver, for choosing your own path, for being brave enough to walk away from everything you were supposed to want. Emma ran back to them, her hands cupped carefully. Look, I found a sea star. Isn't it perfect? They looked at the small orange creature in her palms, and Isabella smiled. It's beautiful, just like everything else about today. As the sun sank below the horizon, the three of them stood together, a family built from coffee shop conversations and impossible choices, and the courage to risk everything for something real. The road ahead stretched wide and open, full of challenges and opportunities they couldn't yet imagine. But they'd face it together, one day at a time, showing up for each other the way family does, not bound by blood or obligation or expectation, but by choice. And that made all the difference. Daniel's hands rested calmly on the steering wheel as they drove home later, no longer trembling with uncertainty. Isabella sat beside him, not in the back seat like an employer, but in the passenger seat like a partner. Emma dozed in the back, exhausted from sun and salt water and the pure joy of studying the ocean she loved. The life they'd built wasn't perfect. The business still faced challenges. Money was tighter than it had been in Isabella's previous life. The apartment they shared was modest compared to her old mansion. Richard's journey toward becoming a real father was ongoing and imperfect. But it was theirs. Every struggle, every victory, every ordinary moment, it belonged to them. What had begun as a small act of kindness in a coffee shop had become something far greater. Not wealth, not power, not the life anyone had expected or planned, but a life they had chosen together. And that was worth more than all the money in the world. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and beautiful and entirely their own. And they were ready for it, together.